Welcome back to Lina's Romantasy collection, the home of your next paranormal obsession. To my returning listeners, welcome back to the pack. And if you're new here, I am so happy you found us. Before we step into the darkness, please take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story with a friend who loves a possessive alpha. I love seeing how far our pack reaches, so let me know in the comments right now, where in the world are you watching from today? Now, take a deep breath. Imagine taking a job at a cursed estate to save your dying brother. The rules are simple. Don't go out at night, don't look the master in the eye, and above all, never, ever touch him. But Norah Clark is about to break every single rule. She's walking into the den of a Lycan King who is losing his mind to silver poisoning, a beast who should tear her apart. But instead of running, she does the unthinkable. She treats the monster like a man. She calls the deadliest predator on Earth a good boy. She thought it would get her killed. Instead, it got her claimed. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Territory of the Damned. The woods surrounding Blackwood Hall didn't just feel quiet. They felt predatory. Norah Clark pulled her thin coat tighter around her throat as she walked up the winding asphalt driveway. The air here was different, thicker, heavier. It smelled of wet earth, pine needles, and something sharp and metallic that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She clutched the strap of her bag, her knuckles white. Inside was the letter from the agency. High-risk position, triple hazard pay, non-disclosure agreement. Most people would have seen high risk and run the other way. But most people didn't have a 10-year-old brother named Leo lying in a sterile hospital bed, his body waging a losing war against leukemia. Most people didn't have a pile of medical bills that looked like a mortgage. For Leo, she whispered, her breath puffing out in a white cloud. She reached the iron gates. They were massive, topped with spikes that looked less like decoration and more like warnings. There was no intercom, just a heavy, rusted latch. As she pushed the gate open, a sound ripped through the forest. It wasn't an owl, it wasn't a fox, it was a howl, deep, guttural, and terrifyingly close. It vibrated in Norah's chest, tapping into some primal instinct that screamed, "Run!" She froze, scanning the tree line. Shadows seemed to move between the trunks, large, swift shapes that vanished before her eyes could focus on them. Just a dog, she lied to herself, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. A big, angry dog. She forced her legs to move. The house loomed ahead, a Gothic monstrosity of black stone and ivy. It looked dead. The windows were dark, the gargoyles on the roof sneering down at her. She reached the massive front door. There was no doorbell, only a heavy iron knocker shaped like a wolf's head. She reached out, her hand trembling. The metal was ice cold. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoed, then died instantly, swallowed by the unnatural silence of the house. She waited. The wind picked up, howling around the eaves. She was about to knock again when the door swung open. It wasn't a butler. It was an older woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that looked like they could see through lead. She sniffed the air, her nose twitching visibly as she looked Norah up and down. "You're small," the woman said, her voice rough. "The agency said you were sturdy." "I'm stronger than I look. I'm Norah Clark. I'm here for the interview." Mrs. Higgins, the file had said, stepped back, leaving the door open. "Come in, but keep your head down, and for the love of the moon, don't look him in the eye." "Why?" Norah asked, stepping over the threshold into the dark, cavernous foyer. "Because he's hungry, girl.
Mrs. Higgins muttered, closing the door and sealing them inside. And he hasn't learned how to separate the staff from the prey.
Chapter 2. The Scent of Salvation. Gabriel Thorne was pacing. He was in the West Wing library, the windows boarded up to block out the moonlight. The silver in his blood was singing today, a burning, corrosive agony that traveled through his veins like acid. 3 years. 3 years since the Hunter ambush. 3 years since the silver bomb exploded in his face, shredding his wolf, melting his skin, and killing his beta. He wasn't just scarred, he was broken. The silver prevented his Lycan healing factor from working. The wounds on his face and body remained raw, angry, constantly fighting a losing battle against infection. But worse than the pain was the wolf. His inner beast was trapped, driven mad by the silver poisoning. It paced inside his mind, snarling, demanding blood, demanding a craving Gabriel couldn't give it. He heard the front door open downstairs. Then it hit him. The scent. It drifted up through the floorboards, cutting through the smell of old blood and medicine. It smelled like rain, like lilac, like home. Gabriel stopped pacing. His chest heaved. A low growl started deep in his throat, involuntary and vibrating. His claws elongated, tearing through the expensive Persian rug beneath his boots. Mate. The word exploded in his brain. The wolf roared in triumph, throwing itself against the cage of Gabriel's mind. Mine, find, claim. No! Gabriel roared, clutching his head. He stumbled back, crashing into his desk. No, not now, not like this. He couldn't have a mate. He was a monster. He was feral. If he went to her now in this state, he wouldn't court her. He would tear her apart. The silver madness made him violent, unpredictable. "Mrs. Higgins!" he bellowed, his voice sounding more animal than human. "Get her out! Get her out of my territory!" But the scent was getting stronger. She was coming up the stairs. He could hear her heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. It was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. It made his mouth water. He scrambled into the corner of the room, the darkest shadow he could find. He huddled there, gripping his own arms, his claws digging into his flesh to use the pain as an anchor. The door handle turned. "Don't come in," he snarled. The door opened anyway. She stood there, small, fragile, human. Her brown hair was windblown, her eyes wide with fear, but she didn't run. She looked into the darkness, searching for him, and when the air from the hallway hit him, carrying her scent in a concentrated wave, Gabriel stopped breathing. The pain in his body, the constant, screaming agony of the silver, stopped, just for a second. His wolf went silent, stunned by the presence of the only thing that could save them. Gabriel lifted his head. His eyes were glowing, not the human green, but the bright, luminescent amber of an alpha wolf. "Run," he whispered, the word scraping out of a throat designed for howling. "Run, little human, before I lose control." Chapter 3. The Predator's Bargain. Norah couldn't move. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to flee. The room was freezing. It smelled of musk and danger. And in the corner, crouched in the shadows, was a creature that looked only half man. She saw the eyes first, amber, glowing, like embers in a dying fire. Then she saw the size of him. He was massive, his shoulders broad enough to block out the light. But he was hunched over, shaking violently. "Mr. Thorne?" she whispered. "I told you to run," the voice growled. It was deep, vibrating in the floorboards beneath her feet. "I can't run," Norah said, her voice trembling but resolute. She took a step into the room. "I need this job. The agency said you were difficult. They didn't say you were hiding in the dark." "Difficult?" A harsh, barking laugh erupted from the corner. "Is that what they call a rabid animal these days?"
He moved then. It was a blur of motion, too fast for a human. 1 second he was in the corner, the next he was standing behind the heavy oak desk, looming over her. Norah gasped. A shaft of light from the hallway hit his face. It was ruined. The left side was a landscape of twisted, melted flesh. It looked like burn scars, but worse. The veins underneath were black, pulsing with a sickness she couldn't identify. The scar tissue pulled at his lip, exposing teeth that looked too sharp, too white. But it was the way he looked at her that froze her blood. He was inhaling deeply, his nostrils flaring. He looked like he was deciding whether to speak to her or eat her. "You smell," he trailed off, his hand gripping the edge of the desk until the wood splintered with a loud crack. "Why do you smell like that?" "Like what?" Norah asked, backing up until her back hit the doorframe. "I showered, I promise." "Like peace, like silence." He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting a battle she couldn't see. "You have no idea what you are walking into. This house is cursed. I am cursed." "I don't believe in curses," Norah said, thinking of Leo's cancer. "That wasn't a curse, it was just bad biology. I believe in work. I can clean, I can cook, I can manage the estate, and I won't ask questions about whatever this is." Gabriel opened his eyes. The amber glow had faded slightly, returning to a piercing green, but the pupils were still blown wide. "You need money," he deduced, his voice rough. "Desperately." "Yes." "Why?" "My brother," Norah said, lifting her chin. "He's dying, and I'm out of options." Gabriel looked at her. He felt the pull of the mate bond, a golden thread trying to tie his soul to hers. He wanted to wrap her in his scent. He wanted to protect her. But the silver in his blood surged again, a reminder of his reality. He was dying too. If he let her stay, he risked killing her in a silver-induced rage. But when she was near, the pain dulled. When she spoke, the wolf calmed down. She was a sedative, a living, breathing antidote. He made a decision, a selfish, dangerous decision. 1 month, he said. You stay for 1 month. You do not leave the house after sunset. You do not go into the woods. And you never, ever touch me. He leaned forward, the predator surfacing again. If you touch me, I cannot guarantee your safety. Do you understand? Norah looked at the splinters of wood under his fingertips. She looked at the agony etched into his scars. She was terrified. "I understand," she whispered. "Then the job is yours," Gabriel growled. "Now get out and lock your door." Norah turned and fled. She ran down the hall, her heart pounding. She had secured the money for Leo, but as she entered the small room assigned to her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't just been hired, she had been claimed.
Chapter 4. The Cage in the West Wing. Norah didn't sleep her first night at Blackwood Hall. The lock on her bedroom door was a heavy brass sliding bolt that looked like it belonged on a fortress gate, not a servant's quarters. She slid it home with a satisfying clack, but it did little to silence the house. Blackwood Hall didn't settle at night. It woke up. At 2 a.m., the sound started. It wasn't the wind. It was a rhythmic, heavy thudding coming from the floor below, specifically from the west wing, the area Gabriel had forbidden her to enter. Thud. Drag, thud, drag. It sounded like a caged animal pacing the length of its enclosure, back and forth, endlessly. Then came the noise that made Norah bury her head under her pillow. It was a sound halfway between a human scream and a feral snarl. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated agony. She grabbed her phone, the blue light blinding in the darkness. She needed an anchor to reality. She opened the text thread with Sarah, the night nurse. "Norah, is he sleeping?" Sarah, out like a light. "His counts are low, Norah. We need to start the new cycle on Monday. Did you get the job?" Norah, "I got it. It's strange, but it pays." Sarah, "Strange how?" Norah, "The boss is sick. He has seizures, I think, and scars." A crash echoed from downstairs, followed by the shattering of glass. Norah flinched, typing quickly. "Norah, I have to go. Kiss Leo for me."
She put the phone down. She should stay in bed. That was the rule. Do not leave your room after sunset. But the screaming stopped, replaced by a low, whimpering groan that tugged at the knot in her chest. It was the same sound Leo made after a bone marrow biopsy. It was the universal language of suffering. Norah threw off the covers. She grabbed her robe and wrapped it tight. She wasn't going to break the rules, not exactly. She just needed to see. She cracked her door open. The hallway was pitch black, save for a flicker of light coming from the bottom of the main staircase. The air smelled thick with that metallic scent again, copper and ozone. She crept to the banister and looked down. Mrs. Higgins was there. The elderly housekeeper was standing outside the double doors of the West Wing library. She was holding a tray with a heavy iron goblet on it. She looked terrified. She placed the tray on the floor, used a long wooden pole to push it through a small cat flap-sized opening at the bottom of the door, and then retreated quickly, crossing herself as she walked away. "Drink, you stubborn beast," Mrs. Higgins whispered to the empty hall. "Drink before the moon takes you." Norah watched, her breath held tight in her lungs. From inside the room, she heard the sound of claws scraping on wood, then the clatter of the iron cup being dragged. Slurp. Gulp. It was animalistic. Norah retreated into her room and slid the bolt shut. Her heart was racing. She wasn't working for a man with seizures. She was working for something else entirely. And for the first time, she wondered if the hazard pay was for the work or for her life.
Chapter 5. The Poison and the Cure. The next morning, the house was silent as a grave. The storm had passed, leaving a pale, watery sunlight that did nothing to warm the stone floors. Norah found Mrs. Higgins in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something that smelled pungent and herbal. It was a dark, purple liquid that bubbled sluggishly. "What is that?" Norah asked, pouring herself coffee. "Medicine," Mrs. Higgins clipped. "For the master. It suppresses the episodes." Norah moved closer. The smell made her eyes water. It smelled like bleach and rotting flowers. "It smells toxic." "It is," Mrs. Higgins said grimly. "Wolfsbane. Enough to kill a horse. But for him, it just dulls the edge." She poured the thick liquid into the same iron goblet Norah had seen the night before. Her hands were shaking so badly she spilled a few drops on the counter. The stone hissed and smoked where the liquid touched it. Norah stared. "It's acid." "It's necessary," Mrs. Higgins said, clutching the counter. "But I can't do it today. My arthritis is flaring. I can't make it up the stairs with the tray." She turned to Norah, her eyes pleading. "You have to take it up." "He told me not to go near him," Norah said, remembering the glowing eyes. "He needs it," Mrs. Higgins snapped. "If he doesn't drink this within the hour, the silver in his blood will drive him into a frenzy. He'll tear the house down. Do you want to be here when that happens?" Norah stared at the smoking liquid. She thought of Leo. If she got fired for refusing a task, Leo's treatment stopped. "Fine," Norah said, grabbing the tray. "Where is he?" "Library. Knock 3 times. Leave it on the floor. Do not go in." Norah walked up the stairs, the iron goblet heavy in her hands. The West Wing felt colder than the rest of the house. She reached the library doors. They were scratched, deep gouges in the wood that looked like they had been made by knives or claws. She knocked. 1, 2, 3. "Leave it," a voice roared from inside. It was raw, ragged. "It's Norah," she called out. "Mrs. Higgins couldn't make it up the stairs." Silence. Then a crash. "I can't reach it," Gabriel groaned. The sound was so filled with defeat it broke her heart. Norah hesitated. "Do not go in." She tried the handle. It didn't budge. She looked at the heavy iron key Mrs. Higgins had left on the hallway table, the emergency key. With shaking fingers, she slid it into the lock. It turned with a heavy clunk. She pushed the door open. The library was a wreck. Books were torn from shelves. The heavy curtains were ruined. Gabriel lay in the center of the room, curled on his side. He was shirtless. Norah gasped. His back was a map of torture. Black veins pulsed under his skin, radiating from the scar tissue on his shoulder and hip. He was sweating profusely, his skin gray.
He looked like he was burning alive from the inside out. "Get out," he wheezed, not looking up. "You need this," Norah said, stepping over a pile of shattered wood. She knelt beside him. The smell of the wolfsbane was overpowering, but underneath it, she smelled him, that rich, woodsy scent that made her head spin. "I can't hold it," he admitted through gritted teeth. "My hands." He held up his hands. They were locked in a spasm, claws half extended, trembling violently. "I'll help you," she whispered. "No, if you touch me, the silver." "Shh." Norah ignored him. She lifted his head, sliding her arm under his neck. His skin was scorching hot. Gabriel flinched as if burned, a low growl rumbling in his chest. But as her skin connected with his, something impossible happened. The black veins near where she touched him seemed to recede. The heat drained away, replaced by a soothing cool. Gabriel's eyes snapped open. They were vivid amber. He looked at her, stunned. Her touch wasn't painful. It was silence. It was the first moment of peace he had felt in 3 years. "Drink," she commanded softly, holding the cup to his lips. He drank. The wolfsbane burned going down, warring with the silver, forcing the wolf back into its cage. He coughed, shuddering, but he didn't pull away from her arm. He leaned into it. He pressed his cheek against her forearm, inhaling her scent like it was oxygen. "Good boy," she whispered instinctively, seeing him calm down. Gabriel froze. His pupils dilated. The phrase hit him like a physical blow, bypassing his human logic and slamming straight into his alpha instincts. Good boy. He should rip her throat out for the disrespect, but his wolf didn't want to kill her. His wolf wanted to crawl into her lap and stay there forever.
Chapter 6. The Imprint. For a long minute, neither of them moved. Norah was kneeling on the ruined rug, holding the head of a man who terrified her, yet whom she felt an inexplicable urge to comfort. Gabriel was breathing heavily, his face pressed against the soft wool of her cardigan, fighting the war between the wolfsbane and his instincts. Slowly, the amber faded from his eyes, leaving them a deep, exhausted green. The claws retracted, leaving his fingernails bloodied and cracked. He pulled away from her, scrambling back until his back hit the leg of the desk. He looked at her with a mix of horror and wonder. "What did you do?" he rasped. "I gave you your medicine," Norah said, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She stood up, wiping her hands on her skirt. "No," said Gabriel, looking at his shoulder. The black veins had stopped pulsing. The agony, usually a level 10, had dialed down to a dull 4. "You touched me and it stopped." "What stopped?" "The burning." He looked up at her, his gaze intense, searching. "Who are you, Norah Clark?" "I told you, I'm the housekeeper." "You are not just a housekeeper," he muttered to himself. "She is a mate, a fated mate, but she's human. How is that possible?" He stood up. It was a struggle, his leg was stiff, but he managed it. He grabbed a tattered shirt from the floor and pulled it on, hiding the ruin of his body. He needed to reassert dominance. He needed to scare her away before he did something stupid, like beg her to touch him again. "You broke the rules," he growled, forcing his voice to be cold. "I was dying," she countered, lifting her chin. "Or it looked like it. I wasn't going to let you choke on the floor." "It is not your job to save me," he roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "Your job is to dust the furniture and stay out of my sight." "Then maybe you shouldn't have hired a human being," Norah yelled back. The stress of the last 2 days, the howling, the poison, Leo's illness, finally snapped her patience. "I am not a robot, Mr. Thorne. I have feelings, I have fear, and seeing a man writhing in pain, I couldn't walk away. So fire me if you want, but don't yell at me for having a heart." Gabriel stared at her. Her chest was heaving, her cheeks were flushed pink. She smelled of righteous anger and antiseptic. He frowned, sniffing the air again. Underneath the lilac and rain, there was a chemical smell clinging to her clothes. "You smell like a hospital," he said abruptly. Norah blinked, the anger deflating.
I visited my brother yesterday before I came here. Chemotherapy. Gabriel identified the scent. He knew it well. It smelled like death trying to be life. Yes, she whispered. Gabriel felt a pang of guilt that cut through his silver sickness. She was fighting a battle for a life she loved, just as he had fought for his pack before the ambush. She wasn't just a fragile human, she was a warrior in her own right. His gaze drifted to the empty iron goblet, then to her hands, hands that had touched his cursed skin without flinching. "I'm not going to fire you," he said, his voice low and gruff. "But you need to be careful, Norah. Today was a close call. The medication takes time to work. If you had come in 5 minutes earlier, I know, you would have hurt me. I would have killed you," he corrected brutally, "and then I would have killed myself." He walked to the window, staring out at the gray tree line. "Go, clean the mess downstairs. And Norah." "Yes?" "Thank you." He didn't turn around. He couldn't, because if he looked at her again, he knew he would drag her back into his arms just to feel the pain stop, and he wasn't selfish enough to damn her to his darkness. Not yet.
Chapter 7. The Beta in the Suit. 2 days later, the silence of Blackwood Hall was shattered not by a howl, but by the roar of a sports car engine. Norah was in the foyer, polishing the grand staircase banister. Her hands ached from the cold. The heating in the house was temperamental, much like its master, but she kept working. Hard labor kept her mind off the image of Gabriel writhing on the floor and the terrifying electric heat of his skin under her fingers. The heavy oak door burst open without a knock. A man strode in. He was sleek, wearing a tailored navy suit that cost more than Norah's entire life's earnings. He had slicked back dark hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. He stopped when he saw Norah, his nose twitching slightly. "Well," he said, his voice smooth like oil on water, "another stray. Gabriel really does have a bleeding heart for the desperate." Norah stiffened, gripping her polishing rag. "I am the household manager. Can I help you?" "Manager," the man chuckled, walking closer. He moved with a prowling grace that reminded Norah uncomfortably of Gabriel. "I'm Marcus Reed, his attorney and his associate." He stopped inches from her, invading her personal space. He inhaled deeply, audibly. "You smell interesting," Marcus murmured, his eyes narrowing. "Lilac and fear. Delicious." Norah took a step back, her heart hammering. "Mr. Thorne is in the library. I'll let him know you're here." "No need to announce me, sweet thing. I know the way to the den." "Marcus," a voice thundered from the top of the stairs. Gabriel stood on the landing. He was leaning heavily on a cane, dressed in black slacks and a high-collared sweater that hid his neck scars. But his posture was rigid, radiating a menace that made the air in the foyer feel suddenly heavy. "Step away from her," Gabriel growled. It wasn't a request, it was a command that seemed to vibrate in the very stones of the house. Marcus flinched, a subtle, involuntary jerk of his head to the side, a sign of submission. He stepped back, raising his hands in a mock surrender. "Easy, Gabe," Marcus smirked, though his eyes were wary. "Just getting acquainted with the new help. She's hardy, unlike the last one." "She is off limits," Gabriel said, descending the stairs slowly. Every step was a battle against gravity and pain, but he didn't falter. He placed himself between Norah and Marcus, using his massive body as a shield. "State your business, Marcus, or get off my territory." "Business," Marcus sighed, opening his briefcase. "The the board is getting restless. Stocks are dipping. Rumors are circulating that you're dead, or worse, feral. They want a public appearance. The Winter Solstice Gala." "I don't do galas," Gabriel snapped. "You do this one," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "Or they vote you out. And if you lose the company, Gabriel, you lose the estate, you lose the sanctuary, and where will you hide your condition then?"
Gabriel's hand tightened on his cane until the wood groaned. The tension between the two men was palpable, a silent, violent conversation happening on a frequency Norah couldn't hear. "Leave the papers," Gabriel hissed, "and get out." Marcus dropped a file on the hallway table. He looked at Gabriel, then shifted his gaze to Norah, a predatory glint in his eye. "See you at the gala, Gabriel. Try not to eat the guests." He turned and walked out. The moment the door clicked shut, Gabriel let out a breath that sounded like a snarl, his body sagging as the adrenaline left him.
Chapter 8. The Cost of Living. The visit from Marcus left a toxic residue in the air. Gabriel retreated to a study and didn't emerge for 24 hours. Norah tried to focus on her work, but by Friday afternoon, the real world came crashing in. Her phone buzzed. It was the clinic. "Miss Clark?" The billing administrator's voice was clipped. "We tried to process the copay for Leo's new round of chemo. It was declined." Norah froze, clutching the phone. "That's impossible. I get paid today. The check hasn't cleared, Miss Clark, and with the new protocol, we need the funds up front, by 5 p.m. today, or we have to postpone the treatment until Monday." "You can't postpone it," she whispered, panic clawing at her throat. "His immune system is at 0. If he waits 3 days—" "I am sorry. It's policy." The line went dead. Norah stared at the phone. It was 3:30 p.m. She needed the money, now. She ran up the stairs to the West Wing. She didn't care about the rules. She didn't care about the growling. She was a sister first and an employee second. She knocked on the library door. "Enter." Gabriel's voice was rough. She pushed the door open. Gabriel was sitting at his desk, staring at the file Marcus had left. He looked exhausted, the scars on his face standing out in stark relief against his pale skin. "I need my paycheck," Norah said, the words rushing out in a breathless tumble. "And I need an advance, a big one." Gabriel looked up, his green eyes narrowing. He sniffed the air. "You smell like terror," he stated. "I need the money, Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice cracking. "Please, I know I've only been here a week. I'll work it off. I'll scrub the floors with a toothbrush. I'll do anything, but I need it now." Gabriel stood up slowly. He moved around the desk, limping slightly. He stopped in front of her. "Is it the brother?" he asked. Norah nodded, tears spilling over. "The treatment. The card was declined. They won't start the chemo without payment. He's just a kid, Gabriel. He's scared and he's sick and I can't—" She broke down. The sobbing took her over, shaking her small frame. Gabriel stood there, his hands hovering uncertainly. His wolf was screaming at him to comfort her, to wrap her in his scent, to kill whoever had made her cry. "How much?" he asked softly. 5,000, she choked out. "For the month." Gabriel didn't hesitate. He pulled a checkbook from his pocket. He carried it now, expecting emergencies. He wrote a check. He tore it out. He handed it to her. Norah looked at the number. It wasn't 5,000. It was 50,000. "This is—" She looked up at him, wide-eyed. "That is your signing bonus and an advance on your salary. There is more where that came from. And buy new boots." He gestured to her worn-out sneakers. "You can't run from a monster in bad shoes." "Gabriel—" "Go," he ordered, turning away to hide the flash of amber in his eyes. "Go pay the bill. Save the pup." Norah clutched the check to her chest. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to thank a beast who had just saved her world. So she did the only thing she could think of. She reached out and squeezed his hand, the scarred, claw-marked hand resting on the desk. "Thank you," she whispered. Gabriel froze at her touch. The pain in his arm vanished instantly, replaced by a warmth that made his knees weak. He didn't pull away. For 5 heartbeats, he let her hold him. "Go," he whispered again, his voice sounding like it was breaking. Chapter 9. The Moonlight Garden. That night, the moon was nearly full.
Gabriel couldn't stay indoors. The pull of the lunar cycle was agonizing when he was trapped in his human form, his wolf clawing at the silver cage in his blood. He needed the earth. He needed the sky. He limped out to the overgrown conservatory garden at the back of the house. It was a wild, tangled mess of thorns and dead roses, illuminated by the silver light of the moon. He sat on a stone bench, groaning as he stretched his bad leg out. The silver poisoning flared under the moonlight, a cruel irony. The very thing that gave him power also amplified the weapon that was killing him. He closed his eyes, tilting his head back, letting the cold air cool his burning skin. "You shouldn't be out here without a coat." Gabriel didn't open his eyes. He had smelled her coming the moment she stepped onto the patio. "Neither should you." Norah walked closer. She was wearing her thin coat, hugging herself against the chill. "I saw you from my window. You looked like you were in pain." "I am always in pain, Norah," he said simply, "but the moon helps. It reminds the wolf who he is." Norah sat on the other end of the bench. She didn't crowd him, but she didn't stay away either. "The wolf?" Gabriel stiffened. He hadn't meant to say that. He turned his head to look at her. The moonlight washed out the red of his scars, making him look almost like the statue of a fallen angel. "It's a metaphor," he lied poorly, "for the anger. You called my brother a pup earlier, and Mrs. Higgins talks about the moon taking you. And I saw your eyes, Gabriel, in the library." She turned to face him fully. "I know you're not just a man with a skin condition. I don't know what you are, but I know you saved Leo today, so I'm not afraid." "You should be," Gabriel growled, leaning closer. "If I told you what I really am, you would run screaming back to the city. Try me." Gabriel looked at her. Her pulse was steady. She meant it. "I am a predator," he whispered, his voice vibrating with the truth he couldn't speak. "I am the thing that bumps in the night, and this," he touched the scar on his face, "this is what happens when a predator meets a trap he can't escape." Norah reached out. Her hand hovered near his face. "Don't," he warned, his breath hitching. "If you touch me in the moonlight, I might not be able to stop." "Stop what?" "Stop wanting you," he confessed, the words torn from him. Norah didn't pull back. She let her fingertips brush the jagged ridge of the scar on his cheek. The reaction was instantaneous. A shockwave of pleasure, pain rolled through Gabriel. His eyes flashed amber. A low, rumbling purr started in his chest, a sound that was undeniably inhuman. He leaned into her hand, his eyes closing, surrendering to the touch that silenced the agony. "You're not a monster," Norah whispered, tracing the line of his jaw. "You're just lonely." Gabriel's hand shot out, gripping her wrist, not to hurt her, but to hold her there. His skin was burning. The scent of her, lilac, rain, and now of gratitude, was driving him insane. "Norah," he groaned, "go inside, please, before the wolf takes over." She hesitated, looking at his glowing eyes. Then, slowly, she pulled her hand away. "Good night, Gabriel," she whispered. She walked back to the house, leaving him alone in the moonlight. Gabriel watched her go, his chest heaving, his claws digging into the stone bench until it cracked. He had survived the silver bomb. He had survived the ambush, but he wasn't sure he could survive Norah Clark.
Chapter 10. Blood on the Snow. The perimeter alarm didn't ring. It smelled. Gabriel was in his study, attempting to focus on the ledgers Norah had organized, but his head snapped up as the scent drifted through the cracked window. It was a vile, musky odor, wet dog, rot, and intrusion. Rogue. Marcus was testing the fences. He was sending scouts to see if the alpha was really as weak as the rumors suggested. Gabriel growled, the sound ripping from his chest.
He grabbed his cane but then threw it aside. If he was going to fight, he couldn't look like a cripple. He had to look like a killer. He moved to the French doors that opened onto the back terrace. The pain in his leg was a screaming siren, but the adrenaline of the threat silenced it. His eyes shifted, human green bleeding into predator amber. He stepped out into the night. It was snowing lightly, a dusting of white covering the dead garden. There, by the tree line, a shadow moved. It was massive, low to the ground. A wolf. Not a true wolf, but a shifted Lycan, a rogue male, gray and matted, eyes glowing yellow with malice. The rogue snarled, sensing Gabriel. It didn't retreat. It charged. Gabriel didn't have time to shift. Shifting with the silver in his blood was agony. It felt like being flayed alive. So he fought as a man. As the rogue launched itself at Gabriel, jaws snapping for his throat, Gabriel dropped his shoulder and slammed into the beast mid-air. The impact was like getting hit by a truck. They crashed onto the frozen earth, sliding through the snow. The rogue bit down on Gabriel's forearm, teeth sinking deep. Gabriel roared, not in pain, but in fury. He drove his free hand, fingers tipped with elongated claws, into the rogue's side. He didn't want to kill. A dead body raised too many questions. He wanted to maim. He ripped downwards. The rogue yelped, releasing its grip and scrambling back, blood staining the white snow. "Tell Marcus," Gabriel hissed, his voice distorted, guttural, "that the next one he sends comes back in pieces." The rogue didn't need to be told twice. It turned and fled into the woods, leaving a trail of red. Gabriel stood there, chest heaving, steam rising from his skin in the cold air. The victory was hollow. He swayed, the adrenaline crash hitting him instantly. He looked at his arm. The sleeve of his sweater was shredded. Blood was welling up, thick and dark. But it wasn't clotting. The silver in his system compromised his healing factor. A wound like this, which should have closed in minutes, would bleed for hours. He stumbled back toward the house. His leg gave out on the first step of the terrace. He caught himself on the stone railing, leaving a bloody handprint. "Damn it," he wheezed. The world tilted. He managed to drag himself into the kitchen entrance before his vision grayed out. He slid down the cabinets, landing on the cold tile floor, clutching his bleeding arm. He needed the wolfsbane, he needed bandages, but he couldn't move. "Norah," he whispered into the dark, a prayer he hadn't meant to say.
Chapter 11. The Nurse and the Beast. Norah found him because she smelled the blood. She had been in the laundry room folding towels when the metallic tang hit the air. It was a scent she knew intimately from Leo's nosebleeds. She followed it to the kitchen. "Gabriel!" She dropped the towels and ran to him. He was slumped against the cupboards, pale as a sheet, his eyes half closed. There was so much blood. It soaked his sweater, pooled on the floor, and smeared on his face. "Don't!" Gabriel groaned, trying to push her away with his good hand. "Don't touch! Dangerous!" "Shut up," Norah said, her voice shaking but her hands steady. She knelt beside him. "Let me see." She pulled his hand away from the wound. It was a jagged, nasty bite mark. The flesh around it wasn't just red, it was turning black, the veins pulsing with that same dark sickness she had seen on his scars. "This needs stitches," she said, her mind shifting into triage mode. "And antiseptic. Do you have a first aid kit?" "Bathroom, West Wing." "Can you walk?" He shook his head. "Legs gone." Norah looked at him. 6'4" of muscle and dead weight. She couldn't carry him. "Okay," she said. "We do it here. Don't move." She ran. She sprinted up the stairs, grabbed the medical box from his bathroom, which was surprisingly well stocked with surgical supplies, and ran back down. She knelt beside him again. She cut the sleeve of his sweater away with scissors. "This is going to hurt," she warned, soaking a gauze pad in iodine. "Do it," Gabriel gritted out. She pressed the pad to the wound. Gabriel threw his head back and let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a snarl that vibrated through the floor. His free hand clawed at the tile, cracking the grout. Norah didn't flinch. She cleaned the wound efficiently, ignoring the growls.
I know, it stings. Breathe, Gabriel. It burns. The silver. It's reacting. Silver? Norah asked, pausing. She looked closely at the wound. It wasn't healing. In fact, it looked like it was fighting the iodine. Just stitch it, he demanded. Close it. Norah threaded the needle. Her hands were surprisingly steady. She had watched the nurses do this to Leo a dozen times. In and out. Tie the knot. She stitched him up. 10 stitches. With every touch of her fingers against his skin, Gabriel's breathing hitched. When she finished, she wrapped his arm in a thick bandage. There, she whispered, sitting back on her heels. She was covered in his blood. Gabriel opened his eyes. The amber glow was gone, replaced by a deep, dark green. He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You have blood on your face," he murmured. He reached out with his uninjured hand. His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away a smear of red. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "You are a strange little human. Most people run from the wolf. You try to bandage him." "Maybe the wolf just needs a better nurse," she replied softly. Gabriel's eyes dropped to her lips. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin. The pull was there, magnetic, undeniable. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to taste the warm sugar and rain. But he was toxic. He was poisoned. He dropped his hand. "Help me up," he said roughly. "I need to clean this mess before Mrs. Higgins sees it." Chapter 12. The Summons. The next morning, the true spawn of blood and bandages was tested by a piece of heavy cream cardstock. A courier had arrived at dawn, a nervous young man who practically threw the envelope at Norah and sped off before the gate even closed. Norah brought it to the dining room, where Gabriel was attempting to eat breakfast with his left arm in a sling. He looked better, thanks to her stitches and a night of sleep, but the dark circles under his eyes remained. "This came for you," she said, placing the envelope on the table. It was sealed with red wax, stamped with a sigil of a howling wolf. Gabriel stared at it like it was a bomb. "Burn it," he said. "It looks official," Norah noted. "It has a wax seal, Gabriel. People don't use wax seals for junk mail." "It's not junk mail. It's a death sentence." He reached out and ripped the envelope open with his teeth, a flash of the animal that made Norah's stomach flip. He pulled out the card. He read it, his face paling. "What is it?" Norah asked. "The Winter Solstice Summit," Gabriel spat, tossing the card onto the table. "It's not just a gala, it's a summoning. The Alpha Council is meeting. Every pack leader in the region must attend. And if you don't go, then I am declared rogue," Gabriel said, his voice flat. "My territory is forfeit. My assets are seized. And Marcus will challenge for leadership. He will take Blackwood Hall." Norah felt the blood drain from her face. "If he takes the hall, the accounts?" "Frozen," Gabriel confirmed. "Your salary, Leo's treatment, all of it, gone." Silence stretched between them. The stakes had just skyrocketed. It wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about survival. "Then you have to go," Norah said firmly. "I can't." Gabriel slammed his good hand on the table. "Look at me, Norah. I can barely walk. I have stitches in my arm. And the silver? If I get stressed, if I get angry, the wolf takes over. If I shift in a room full of alphas in this condition, they will put me down like a rabid dog." "Not if you have a handler," Norah said. Gabriel looked up. "A what?" "A handler," Norah repeated, her mind racing. "Like with Leo, when he gets panicked during a procedure, I talk him down. I ground him. I keep him focused." She walked around the table and stood next to him. "You said my touch stops the pain. You said I smell like peace. So take me with you." "You?" Gabriel laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. "You want to walk into a room full of apex predators? Norah, they will smell the fear on you. They will smell that you are human. They will eat you alive." "Let them try," Norah said, her eyes flashing with a fierceness that surprised him. "I faced you down in the dark, didn't I? I stitched you up while you were growling at me. I'm not afraid of a bunch of men in tuxedos, fur or no fur." She leaned in, placing her hands on the table, leaning into his space. I need this job, Gabriel. I need this money. So if you need a handler to keep your wolf on a leash for one night, I am volunteering. I will be your anchor. I will be your calm. Gabriel stared at her. She was insane. She was suicidal. And she was magnificent. He felt the wolf inside him perk up, wagging its tail at the idea of having her close. Mate, protector, ours. One night, Gabriel whispered, the fight draining out of him. But you do exactly what I say. You do not leave my side. And if I tell you to run, you run. Deal, Norah said. Gabriel looked at the invitation. The wax seal gleamed in the morning light. He was going back to the viper's nest, but this time he was bringing a secret weapon, a human girl who smelled like rain and refused to let him die.
Chapter 13. The Empty Chair. The preparations for the Winter Solstice Summit turned the house into a war room. Clothes were ordered, schedules were drafted, and security protocols were reviewed. But through it all, Norah noticed the glaring absence of a team. It was just her, a human housekeeper managing the return of a Lycan King. "Where are they?" Norah asked. They were in the library. Gabriel was trying to shave with a street razor, his hand trembling dangerously close to his jugular. Norah watched him from the doorway, holding a fresh towel. Gabriel paused, the blade hovering over the scar on his chin. "Where are who?" "Your pack," Norah said, stepping into the room. "The agency files said you run the Blackwood pack. That's, what, hundreds of wolves? You're the alpha. You should have a beta, a second in command, someone to help you tie your tie so I don't have to." Gabriel lowered the razor. His expression darkened, the shadows in the room seeming to gather around him. "I had a beta," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "His name was Liam. He was my brother, in everything but blood." "Did he quit?" "He died," Gabriel said brutally. 3 years ago. He took the brunt of the silver bomb. He shielded me. He died screaming while his skin melted off." Norah's breath hitched. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," Gabriel snapped. "It was war. Wolves die." "But the others?" Norah pressed, though she sensed a danger. "Surely there are others who are loyal. Why are you alone in this huge house with only Mrs. Higgins?" Gabriel turned to face her. His eyes were flashing with that unnatural amber light. "Because of the poison, Norah. The silver in my blood, it twists my instincts. It makes me hyper-territorial. If another male wolf steps foot in this house, even a friend, my wolf sees a challenger. I don't see a beta, I see a threat." He took a step toward her, the razor glinting in the lamplight. "I exiled them," he confessed, the shame heavy in his voice. "I sent my guards away. I sent my friends away, because the last time my gamma tried to help me up the stairs during an episode, I nearly ripped his throat out." He looked at his shaking hands. "I am safe around humans because you don't smell like predators. You don't trigger the challenge response. But if I kept my pack here, I would have killed them all by now. So I sit here alone, to keep them safe from me." Norah stared at him. The isolation wasn't arrogance, it was a sacrifice. He was protecting his people by living in hell. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered, walking over to him. She took the razor from his hand before he could cut himself. "Sit down, Gabriel. Let me finish this. You're going to look like a king, not a hermit." Chapter 14. Shaving the Beast. The act of shaving him was more intimate than the waltz would ever be. Gabriel sat in the heavy leather chair, a towel draped around his shoulders. He had to tilt his head back, exposing the most vulnerable part of a predator, his throat, to a human holding a blade. Norah worked in silence. She lathered the shaving soap, the brush moving gently over his skin. She had to navigate the landscape of his scars carefully. The skin on the left side of his jaw was tight, puckered, and devoid of nerve endings in some places, but hypersensitive in others. "Tell me if it hurts," she murmured, scraping the razor down his cheek. "It's fine,"
he grunted, though his hands were gripping the armrests so hard the leather creaked. He wasn't reacting to pain, he was reacting to her. She was standing between his spread legs to get the right angle. Her stomach was inches from his face. He could smell the soap she used, the coffee she had drunk, the steady, rhythmic beat of her heart. His wolf was purring, actually purring. It was a low, vibrational sound in his chest that he couldn't stop. "Are you purring?" Norah asked, pausing with the blade mid-stroke. A small smile tugged at her lips. "It's a growl," Gabriel lied, his face heating up, of annoyance. "It sounds like a giant cat engine," she teased. She wiped the foam from the blade. "Turn your head to the left." He obeyed. He trusted her. That realization terrified him more than the summit. He trusted this human with a blade at his throat more than he trusted his own instincts. She finished the jawline and moved to his neck. This was the danger zone. The scars here were thick, ropey. "Easy," she whispered, sensing his tension. She placed her free hand on his chest, right over his heart. "I've got you. Just breathe." Her hand on his heart was a brand. He felt his pulse synchronize with hers. The silver agony in his blood receded, pushed back by the overwhelming calm of the mate bond. She finished. She wiped his face with a hot towel. "There," she said softly, stepping back to admire her work. Gabriel stood up and looked in the mirror. The beard was gone. The face staring back was still scarred, still ruined, but the jaw was strong. The eyes were clear. He looked like the alpha he used to be. "You have a gift, Norah," he murmured, touching his smooth cheek. "You make the broken things look whole." "They aren't broken, just rearranged." He turned to her. The air crackled. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to claim her. But he couldn't. Not before the summit. If he claimed her now, his scent would be all over her, and that would put a target on her back tonight. "Get dressed," he said, his voice rough. "The car leaves in an hour. Wear something distracting. I need them looking at you, not my limp." Chapter 15. Into the Viper's Nest. The summit was being held at the Obsidian Tower in the city center, neutral ground for the packs. The limousine ride was tense. Gabriel sat in the back, dressed in a black tuxedo that had been tailored to hide the bulk of the bandages on his arm. He wore black leather gloves to conceal his cracked fingernails. Norah sat across from him. She wore a dress Gabriel had ordered for her, a floor-length gown of emerald green silk that hugged her curves and brought out the brown of her eyes. It was elegant, but modest enough to hide the bruises of her poverty. "Rules," Gabriel said as the city lights blurred past. "We are walking into a room with 50 alphas. The testosterone alone is toxic." "Okay," Norah said, clutching her small clutch bag. "What are the rules?" 1. Do not look any other male in the eye. Eye contact is a challenge. If you challenge an alpha, I have to fight him, and I am not in a condition to fight 50 men. No eye contact. Check. 2. Stay touching me. My arm, my hand, my shoulder. Your scent needs to be mixed with mine. It tells them you are under my protection. If you let go, you are fair game. I won't let go. 3. Gabriel said, leaning forward, his gaze intense. If the silver takes over, if I start to shift, you use the code word. The code word? Sanctuary, he said. If I say sanctuary, or if you see my eyes turn fully amber and stay that way, you get me out. You lie, you create a distraction, you pull the fire alarm. I don't care, but you get me out before I kill someone. Sanctuary, Norah repeated. Got it. The car slowed. They had arrived. Through the window, Norah saw the entrance. It wasn't like the celebrity gala Marcus had described. This was darker. The security guards were massive men who moved with predatory grace. The guests arriving weren't smiling for cameras. They were sizing each other up. "Ready to walk into the lion's den?" Gabriel asked, reaching for his cane. "Wolf's den," Norah corrected. She reached out and took his gloved hand. Her grip was firm, warm, and reassuring. "And yes, I'm ready." The chauffeur opened the door. The smell hit them first, a wall of musk, pine, and aggression. Gabriel stiffened, a low growl building in his throat as the territorial instincts flared. Norah squeezed his hand. "Easy," she whispered, just for him. "I'm right here." Gabriel exhaled. He centered himself on her scent. He stepped out of the car, pulling Norah with him, and stood tall. The chatter on the steps stopped. Heads turned. Snouts sniffed the air. The Lycan King of Blackwood had returned, and he had brought a human into the fold. The whisper that ran through the crowd was louder than a scream. Prey.
Chapter 16. A Sea of Apex Predators. The Obsidian Towers Ballroom was a masterclass in intimidation. Unlike human galas where the air smelled of perfume and champagne, this room smelled of raw power. It was a heavy, suffocating musk, cedar, rain, blood, and earth. Gabriel felt the aggression the moment he stepped through the archway. "I'm not flinching," Norah whispered, squeezing his arm. "I'm shivering. It's freezing here." Gabriel smirked. It was cold. Lycans ran hot. They kept the ambient temperature low. He led her into the room. He felt the waves of dominance rolling off the other alphas, testing him. Is he broken? Is the king dead? A large man with a thick beard stepped into their path. Alpha Kyle of the Northern Ridge. "Thorne," Kyle grunted, crossing his arms. He didn't offer a hand. That was an insult. "We heard you were rotting in that castle of yours. You look scarred." "And you look fat, Kyle," Gabriel replied smoothly, his voice bored. "The North must be treating you well, or have you stopped hunting your own kills?" Kyle bristled, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Norah squeezed Gabriel's arm, a warning. "Don't start a fight." "I see you brought a pet," Kyle sneered, looking down at Norah. He leaned in, sniffing loudly near her hair. "Human, sweet, and uncollared. Bold move, bringing a snack to the summit." Gabriel's vision flashed red. The silver in his blood spiked. His wolf surged forward, wanting to rip Kyle's throat out for daring to smell his mate. "She is not a snack," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to that terrifying, vibrating frequency of an enraged alpha. "She is my right hand, and if you sniff her again, Kyle, I will cut your nose off and feed it to you." The room went deadly silent. Kyle stepped back, his eyes widening. He had felt the power behind the threat. The king wasn't broken, he was just angry. "My apologies," Kyle muttered, backing away. Gabriel let out a breath, his hand shaking on his cane. "That was close," Norah whispered, guiding him toward the bar. "Your eyes flared amber." "He smelled you," Gabriel hissed. "He breathed in your scent. I wanted to kill him." "Focus on me," Norah commanded softly. She moved in front of him, blocking his view of the room. She reached up and adjusted his tie, her knuckles brushing his throat. "Focus on my heartbeat. Ignore them. They are just noise." Gabriel closed his eyes for a second, inhaling her scent. Lilac, rain, sanctuary. "Better?" she asked. "Marginally," he grumbled. "Get me a whiskey, a triple, before I start biting people." Chapter 17. The Provocation. The speeches were tedious. The posturing was exhausting, but Gabriel held it together. He stood by the pillar, Norah glued to his side, enduring the stares and the whispers. Then Marcus made his move. He took the stage. He wasn't an alpha, but as the legal counsel for the council, he had speaking privileges. He smiled at the crowd, then let his gaze land on Gabriel. "We have discussed territory," Marcus announced, his voice amplified by the microphone. "We have discussed revenue, but we must discuss stability. The Blackwood pack has been leaderless for 3 years. Alpha Thorne claims to be recovering, but we have reports, concerning reports." Gabriel stiffened. Norah's hand tightened on his bicep. "Reports of madness," Marcus continued, his smile turning cruel. "Reports that the Alpha is poisoning himself with wolfsbane to keep from slaughtering his own staff. Reports that he can no longer shift."
Murmurs broke out across the room. This was it, the challenge. "I propose," Marcus said, pointing a finger directly at Gabriel, "a vote of no confidence, unless, of course, Gabriel cares to demonstrate his fitness, perhaps a partial shift, show us the wolf, Gabriel, or admit that the wolf is dead." The trap was sprung. If Gabriel shifted, the silver would react with the wolfsbane in his system, driving him into a feral, murderous psychosis. He would kill everyone in the room. If he refused, he looked weak. Rage, hot and blinding, flooded Gabriel's mind. The silver screamed in his veins. He didn't care about the politics anymore. He wanted Marcus's head on a spike. "Gabriel, no," Norah whispered. He ignored her. He pushed off the pillar. He didn't need the cane. The anger fueled him. He stepped into the light, his eyes glowing a brilliant, terrifying amber. "You want the wolf, Marcus?" Gabriel roared. His voice cracked, shifting into a snarl. His bones began to pop, the sound of a forced shift beginning. The crowd gasped, backing away. They saw the black veins pulsing on his neck. They smelled the toxicity radiating off him. "He's turning rogue," someone shouted. "Put him down." Guards moved in, hands on their weapons. Gabriel was losing it. The red haze consumed his vision. He was going to kill them all. He was going to burn the building down. Then he felt a tug on his jacket.
Chapter 18. Say it again. Norah didn't think. She acted on instinct, the same instinct that told her how to handle a terrified child or a wounded animal. She grabbed Gabriel's lapels to pull him back, but he moved first. His hand clamped around her waist, a band of steel, and he yanked her backward into the alcove behind the massive velvet curtains. They were hidden from the crowd, shrouded in heavy fabric and darkness. Gabriel was vibrating. A low, continuous growl was tearing out of his chest. His hands were clawed, shredding the silk of his own tuxedo. He was huge, terrifying, and seconds away from a massacre. "Let me go," he snarled, snapping his teeth at her. "I will kill him. I will bathe in his blood." "Gabriel, look at me," Norah ordered. She didn't back down. She stepped into his space, grabbing his face with both hands. His skin was scorching hot. "He is baiting you," she said fiercely. "If you shift, you die. They will shoot you. Look at me." He couldn't. His eyes were rolling back, fully amber, no pupil visible. He was drowning in the silver madness. "Sanctuary," Norah cried out, the code word. It didn't work. He was too far gone. He grabbed her wrists, his grip bruising. He pushed her back against the cold stone wall, pinning her there. He loomed over her, teeth bared, drool mixing with blood on his chin. He wasn't Gabriel anymore. He was the beast. Norah's heart hammered, but not from fear. She saw the panic behind the rage. He was scared. He was a good man trapped in a monster's nightmare. She softened her voice. She stopped fighting his grip. She reached up and stroked his thumb with her own. "Easy," she whispered, her voice dropping to a low, soothing melody. "Easy, Gabriel. I've got you. You're safe." He panted, his breath hot on her face. The growl stuttered. She moved her hand to the back of his neck, scratching gently at the base of his skull, a spot she knew dogs loved. It was a gamble, a massive gamble. "That's it," she cooed, looking deep into his glowing eyes. "Calm down. You don't need to fight them. You've got me. Stay with me." Gabriel shuddered. The rage began to fracture. The soothing tone, her scent, the touch on his neck, it was grounding him. "Good boy," she whispered. The effect was instantaneous. Gabriel went rigid. The amber in his eyes darkened, swirling into a deep forest green. The feral snarl vanished, replaced by a sharp intake of breath. He didn't release her wrists. Instead, he pressed his body flush against hers, pinning her harder against the wall. The dynamic shifted violently, from predator and prey to man and woman. He lowered his head until his lips were grazing her ear. The heat radiating off him was no longer angry. It was possessive, intense, overwhelming.
"What did you call me?" he rumbled, his voice rasping against her skin. Norah swallowed hard, her pulse jumping in her throat. She realized what she had said. She had called the Lycan King a boy. I was just trying to calm you down," she stammered. Gabriel pulled back slightly to look at her. His eyes were clear now, burning with a dark, hungry intelligence. He wasn't mad. He was turned on. The dominance in him had recognized the submission in her attempt to soothe him, and it had sparked a fire that had nothing to do with Silver. He leaned in again, his nose brushing hers. "Say it again," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that vibrated straight to her core. Norah hitched her breath. "Gabriel, say it," he snarled softly, his grip on her wrists tightening just enough to be a warning. "Tell your alpha he's a good boy." Norah trembled. The danger hadn't passed, it had just changed shape. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice shaking. Gabriel let out a sound that was half groan, half growl. He released her wrists and buried his hands in her hair, crashing his mouth down onto hers.
Chapter 19. The Taste of Sanctuary. The kiss was not gentle. It was a collision of desperation and instinct, a claiming that erased the line between man and beast. Gabriel's mouth was hot, tasting of whiskey and copper. He devoured her, his tongue sweeping into her mouth with a hunger that stole Norah's breath. He pressed her so hard against the stone wall that she could feel the cold seeping through her silk dress, contrasting violently with the furnace heat of his body. Norah didn't fight him. She couldn't. Her hands, which had been soothing him a moment ago, were now gripping his tuxedo jacket, pulling him closer. The fear that had paralyzed her in the ballroom evaporated, replaced by a jolt of electricity that sizzled down her spine. For a moment, there was no summit, no Marcus, no silver poisoning. There was only Gabriel, heavy and solid against her, making a sound low in his throat that vibrated against her lips. Then reality crashed back in. "Mr. Thorne?" A security guard's voice echoed near the curtain. "Sir, we heard a disturbance." Gabriel froze. He tore his mouth from hers with a gasp, resting his forehead against hers. His breathing was ragged, loud in the small space. "Gabriel," Norah whispered, her lips swollen and tingling. "We have to go." Gabriel opened his eyes. They were no longer amber. They were a deep, dark forest green, blown wide, stunned, but human. The madness had receded, chased away by the overwhelming sensory input of her. He looked at her, his expression a mix of awe and terror. He touched his lips as if checking if the kiss had been real. "You stopped it. The shift. You stopped it." "The guard," Norah hissed, grabbing his hand. "Code word, sanctuary. We are leaving, now." Gabriel shook his head, clearing the fog. The alpha returned. He straightened his jacket, shielding Norah with his body as he reached for the edge of the curtain. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice rough but controlled. He swept the curtain back. The guard jumped, hand going to his holster. "Mr. Thorne, we were concerned. There was growling." "A disagreement with my tailor," Gabriel lied smoothly, though his voice was an octave lower than usual. "The fit of this jacket is restrictive. It makes me irritable." The guard looked at Gabriel's disheveled appearance, the ripped lapels, the wild look in his eyes, and then at Norah, whose lipstick was smudged and who looked thoroughly kissed. The guard blushed. "I see. My apologies, sir. Do you require assistance?" "We require our car. Immediately. The air in here is stale." They moved fast. Gabriel didn't limp, he prowled. He kept a punishing pace until they burst out of the service doors and into the cold night air. The limousine was waiting. As soon as the doors closed, sealing them inside the safety of the dark tent, Gabriel collapsed back against the leather seat, letting out a long, shuddering breath. Chapter 20. The Silent Drive. The silence in the car was heavy, charged with the static electricity of what had just happened. Norah sat on the opposite seat, her knees pressed together, her hands clutching her purse to stop them from shaking. She touched her mouth. It still burned. Gabriel was staring out the window, his jaw clenched tight. He hadn't looked at her since they got in.
He was gripping his knees, his knuckles white. "Say something," Norah whispered finally. The silence was suffocating her. Gabriel didn't turn. "If I speak," he said, his voice straining, "I might do something unforgivable." "You kissed me," she said. "Was that unforgivable?" Gabriel turned his head slowly. The shadows played across his scars, making him look dangerous and beautiful. "It wasn't a kiss, Norah. It was a lapse in control. It was my wolf taking what he wanted because you provoked him." "I provoked him?" Norah bristled. "I saved you. You were about to turn into a werewolf in the middle of a ballroom." "You called me a good boy," Gabriel roared, the sudden volume making her jump. He leaned forward, the space between them vanishing. "Do you know what that means to an alpha?" he hissed. "It is dominance. It is praise given from a master to a subordinate. No one speaks to an alpha like that, not unless they want their throat ripped out." "But you didn't rip my throat out," Norah pointed out, her voice trembling but defiant. "No," Gabriel admitted. His gaze dropped to her throat, watching her pulse flutter. "You didn't, because my wolf, he liked it." He looked horrified by the admission. "He submitted to you," Gabriel whispered, the words sounding like a confession of sin. "The silver drives him mad. It makes him want to kill everything. But you treated him like a pet. You offered him structure, and he took it. He chose your praise over his rage." He sat back, running a hand through his hair. "It's impossible. You're human. You shouldn't have that kind of power over me." "Maybe it's not power," said Norah softly. "Maybe it's just trust. You trust me not to hurt you." "Trust gets you killed in my world," Gabriel muttered, but he didn't argue further. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box he had swiped from the event table, a favor for guests, truffles. He tossed it onto the seat next to her. "Eat," he commanded gruffly. "You're shaking. Low blood sugar." Norah looked at the box, then at him. He was back to barking orders, trying to regain control, but she saw the way his eyes tracked her every movement. "Thank you," she said. She opened the box and took a bite of the chocolate. Gabriel watched her eat. The scent of chocolate and lilac filled the car. He closed his eyes and inhaled, letting the scent settle his blood. He was terrified. He was exhilarated, and for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't thinking about the past. He was thinking about how he was going to keep her safe when Marcus inevitably came for her. They arrived back at Blackwood Hall just after midnight. The moment Gabriel stepped out of the car, the adrenaline crash hit him harder than before. He stumbled on the gravel, his bad leg giving way completely. "Gabriel!" Norah was there instantly, ducking under his arm to support his weight. "I've got you," she grunted, straining under his bulk. "I'm too heavy," he groaned, sweat breaking out on his forehead. "Leave me. Get Mrs. Higgins." "Shut up and walk," Norah ordered. "Left foot, right foot." They managed to get inside the foyer. Gabriel slumped onto the bench near the door, breathing hard. The silver was surging again, punishing him for the partial shift. The veins in his neck were black and pulsing. "The medicine," Norah said, turning to run to the kitchen. "No," Gabriel gasped, catching her wrist. "No medicine. It takes too long." "Then what? You're burning up." "You," he rasped. He pulled her closer, his eyes pleading. "Just you. The touch. It works faster." Norah hesitated. The kiss had changed things. The intimacy was no longer clinical. It was loaded, but seeing him in agony overrode her hesitation. She stepped between his knees. She placed her hands on his face, her thumbs tracing the fever-hot skin of his cheeks. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm here." Gabriel let out a shuddering sigh, leaning his forehead against her stomach. He wrapped his arms around her waist, burying his face in the fabric of her dress. "Anchor me," he murmured. Norah stroked his hair. It was thick and soft. She felt the tension bleeding out of him, flowing into her. It was a strange sensation, like she was a lightning rod grounding a storm. "I'm here," she repeated. "You're home. You're safe." They stayed like that for a long time in the dim light of the hallway. The clock ticked, the wind howled outside. Eventually, Gabriel lifted his head. He looked exhausted, but the black veins had receded. "Norah," he said, his voice grave. "Yes?" "Marcus saw us leave. He saw me losing control. He knows I didn't shift." "So?" "So, he knows I have a weakness," said Gabriel. He looked up at her, his green eyes filled with a terrifying clarity. "He knows I have a handler, and he knows that without you, I am a feral beast he can put down." He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, a gesture of reverence and warning. "You will come for you, Norah. He will try to remove you from the board." Norah felt a chill run down her spine. "What do we do?" "We stop hiding," said Gabriel. A dark, ruthless shadow crossed his face. "If he wants a war, I will give him one. But from this moment on, you do not leave this house without me. You sleep in the West Wing, in the room next to mine." "Gabriel!" "It is not a request," he growled, the alpha surfacing. "You are the key to my control, and I will not let anyone take my key." He stood up, towering over her. "Come," he said, holding out his hand. "Let's move your things." Norah looked at his hand. It was a scarred, dangerous hand, but it was the only thing standing between her and the wolves at the door. She took it. Chapter 22. The Inner Sanctum. Moving into the West Wing felt less like a relocation and more like an induction into a secret society. Gabriel didn't wait for morning. He limped with Norah back to the servants' quarters, stood guard while she threw her few belongings into a bag, and then escorted her back through the silent, shadowy house to the forbidden wing. The room next to his was not a servant's room. "This is the guest suite," Gabriel said, opening the double doors. Norah stepped inside and gasped. It was massive, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with a four-poster bed that looked like it could sleep a family of four. There was a fireplace, cold and empty, and heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the night. "It hasn't been used in years," Gabriel muttered, walking over to check the window latches. He tested them with unnecessary force, his claws scratching the metal. "I'll have Mrs. Higgins bring fresh linens in the morning. For tonight, the sheets are dusty but clean." "Gabriel, this is too much," Norah said, clutching her canvas bag. "I was fine in the East Wing." "The East Wing is too far," he countered, turning to face her. "If Marcus sends a team, if he sends another rogue, I can't reach you in time from there. Here, I can hear you breathe. I can smell if your adrenaline spikes." He walked to the door that connected her room to the hallway. He ran his hand along the frame, inhaling deeply, then rubbing his palm against the wood. Norah watched him. "What are you doing?" "Marking the perimeter," he said, his voice low. "Any wolf that crosses this threshold will know you are under alpha protection. It will make them hesitate. Hesitation buys me seconds. Seconds save lives." He looked at her, his green eyes burning with that intense, possessive heat. "Lock this door," he ordered, "and the connecting door to my room. Keep it unlocked. If you scream, I will be there before you finish the breath." "And if you scream?" Norah asked softly, remembering the sounds of his agony from nights past. Gabriel paused, his hand on the knob of the connecting door. "If I scream," he whispered, "you lock the door and pray the silver burns me out before I get through it." He closed the door, leaving her alone in the opulent silence. Norah didn't sleep. She lay in the center of the massive bed, listening to the heavy, rhythmic pacing of the beast in the next room, knowing that the only thing separating her from a lethal predator was a layer of plaster and a very fragile trust. Chapter 23. The Paper Trail. By morning, the dynamic in the house had shifted. There was no more pretense of housekeeper and master. They were partners in a siege. They set up the war room in Gabriel's library. The curtains were drawn to block the daylight that irritated Gabriel's sensitive eyes. He was pacing. His leg was better today, the swelling reduced by Norah's proximity, while Norah sat at the desk, surrounded by mountains of paper. Marcus is smart, Norah said, tapping a pen against her lip. But he's greedy, and greed makes people sloppy. He's been managing the estate for 5 years, Gabriel said, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. He knows the system better than I do. He knows the old system, Norah corrected. She accepted the coffee without looking up. He assumes no one checks the vendor list for the restoration projects. Look at this. She spun the laptop around. May, June, July. 3 payments of £50,000 to Apex Masonry for structural reinforcement of the catacombs. Gabriel frowned, leaning over her shoulder. He smelled of soap and cedar. We don't have catacombs. We have a wine cellar. Exactly, Norah said. I looked up Apex Masonry. The address is a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands, and the director of the company, a Mr. L. Silvers. Gabriel let out a harsh bark of laughter. Liam Silvers, that was his mother's maiden name. He's mocking me. He's stealing from you, Norah said grimly. And it gets worse. I tracked the payments. They aren't just going to offshore accounts. Some of them are being routed back into the city, to a private security firm called Black Fang Solutions. Gabriel went still. The air temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Black Fang, he snapped, the word vibrating in his chest. That's a mercenary group, rogues for hire. They do dirty work for packs that want to keep their hands clean. He's using your money to pay for a private army, Norah realized, horror dawning on her. Those rogues in the woods, the ones testing the perimeter, he's paying them with my own fortune, Gabriel finished. He slammed his mug down, coffee sloshing onto the desk. He's funding his coup with my inheritance. He turned away, raking his hair through his head. I should kill him. I should walk into his office and tear his head off. You can't, Norah said calmly. If you kill him, the council will execute you. You need to destroy him legally first. You need to freeze his assets, cut off the payments to the mercenaries. If the money stops, the rogues leave. Gabriel looked at her. She was small, human, and fragile, but her mind was sharper than his claws. You are dangerous, Norah Clark, he murmured, a flicker of admiration softening his rage. I'm motivated. Now, how do we freeze the accounts without him noticing? We don't, Gabriel said, a wicked smile spreading across his scarred face. We go to the bank, in person, and we remind them who the Alpha really is. They were preparing to leave for the bank when Norah's phone rang. It wasn't the clinic. It was an unknown number. Norah picked it up, frowning. Hello? Ms. Clark, a smooth, oily voice answered. It took Norah a second to place it, and when she did, her blood ran cold. Marcus, she whispered. Gabriel, who was putting on his coat across the room, froze. He was at her side in a blur of motion, leaning in to listen. Norah, darling, Marcus purred. I noticed you've been doing some digging. My alerts on the banking server are lighting up like a Christmas tree. I'm just doing my job, Norah said, her voice trembling slightly. Gabriel placed a steadying hand on her back, his heat grounding her. Your job is to dust, Marcus said, his tone sharpening, not to act as forensic accountant for a dying beast. You're playing a dangerous game, little human. You're meddling in pack business. I don't care about your pack, Norah said, finding her courage. I care about the theft. Marcus laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. I care about the money. For the brother, Leo, isn't it? Cute kid, 10 years old, leukemia, St. Luke's ward, room 404. Norah stopped breathing. The phone slipped in her sweaty palm. Gabriel's hand on her back turned into a claw, gripping her dress. A low, lethal growl started in his chest. Don't you dare, Norah whispered. Don't you dare touch him. I don't have to touch him, Marcus said lightly. I just have to make a call. The hospital is very expensive, Norah, and accidents happen. Systems fail. Power goes out. Medicine gets misplaced. If you hurt him, I'm a reasonable man, Marcus interrupted. I just want you to stop. Stop the audit, delete the files, convince Gabriel that he's tired, that he needs to retire. Do that, and Leo gets the best care money can buy. Keep digging and, well, flowers are expensive too, for the funeral. Click. Norah dropped the phone. It hit the rug with a dull thud. She stood there, paralyzed. The room spun. He knew. He knew where Leo was. He knew the room number. Norah. Gabriel turned her around. His face was terrifying, eyes glowing bright amber, teeth bared in a snarl that wasn't directed at her, but she didn't see the monster. She saw the rage of a protector. He threatened Leo, she choked out, grabbing Gabriel's lapels. He knows where he is. He's going to kill him. No, Gabriel roared. He won't. He grabbed his phone from his pocket. He dialed a number, his claws nearly cracking the screen. Elias, he barked into the phone. It's Thorne. I don't care what time it is. I need a favor. No, I need an extraction. He listened for a second. St. Luke's Hospital, room 404. I want a full detail. 4 guards. Use the private ambulance. Get the boy out. Norah stared at him. Where? Where are you taking him? Gabriel hung up the phone. He looked at Norah, his expression fierce and unyielding. Here, he said. Here? Norah gasped. To a house full of wolves and poison? It's the only place Marcus can't get to him. The house is a fortress. I will ward the room myself. Mrs. Higgins will cook for him. And he leaned down, gripping her shoulders, I will sit outside his door and tear apart anything that tries to touch him. I promise you, no one hurts the pup, not while I breathe. Norah looked at him. He was asking her to bring her dying brother into a war zone, but as she looked into his glowing eyes, she realized something. It wasn't a war zone. It was a sanctuary, and for the first time, she believed the dragon to actually save them. Okay, she whispered, bring him home.
Chapter 25. The Cargo. The private ambulance arrived under the cover of a moonless night, its lights cut to avoid drawing attention. It rolled up the long, winding driveway of Blackwood Hall like a hearse, silent and ominous. Gabriel stood on the front steps, leaning on his cane, the wind whipping his coat around his legs. His senses were dialed up to the maximum. He could hear the engines hum, the tires crunching on gravel, and, most importantly, the faint, rapid heartbeat of the child inside. Norah stood beside him, shivering in the cold night air. She wasn't shivering from the temperature, she was vibrating with anxiety. He's going to be scared, she whispered, twisting her hands together. He's never been out of the hospital at night. He doesn't know where he is. He knows he is with you, Gabriel said, his voice a low rumble meant to ground her. That is all that matters. The ambulance stopped. The back doors swung open. 2 paramedics, large men, clearly private contractors Gabriel had vetted, unloaded a stretcher. On it lay a small figure, bundled in thick blankets, wearing a knit hat with Yoda ears. Norah ran forward. Leo! The boy stirred, blinking blearily against the dim porch lights. He looked impossibly small, his skin translucent and pale. Norah? I'm here, Bug. We're here. We're at the castle. Leo tried to sit up, his eyes widening as he looked at the looming stone facade of the house. Whoa, it's real! Let's get him inside, one of the paramedics grunted. The air is freezing. They moved to lift the stretcher up the grand stone steps, but the wheels clattered loudly on the uneven masonry. Leo winced, a whimper escaping his lips. Stop, Gabriel commanded. He moved down the stairs. The paramedics froze, looking up at the scarred, imposing figure of the man blocking their path. The vibration hurts him, Gabriel said. He handed his cane to a stunned Norah. Mr. Thorne, you shouldn't, Norah started, knowing his leg was still healing from the rogue fight. Gabriel ignored her. He walked to the stretcher, he bent down, ignoring the scream of protest from his own hip, and scooped the boy up, blankets and all. Leo gasped, stiffening. He was staring right into Gabriel's face, the scars, the intense green eyes, the sheer size of him. Hello, Leo, Gabriel said softly. I'm the dragon.
Leo stared at him, mouth slightly open. "You're really big." "So I've been told," Gabriel murmured. "Hold on tight. The stairs are steep." He turned and carried the boy up the steps. He didn't limp. He forced his body to be a stable platform, absorbing every shock so the boy wouldn't feel it. He carried him through the massive oak doors, into the warmth of the foyer, and straight up the grand staircase. Norah followed, clutching the cane, tears pricking her eyes. She watched the monster carry her world in his arms, treating the fragile boy like he was made of spun glass. Chapter 26. Territory Marked. The room Gabriel had prepared for Leo was not a guest room. It was a fortress. Located directly across from Norah's suite in the West Wing, it had been sterilized, heated, and stocked. Mrs. Higgins had somehow found a collection of vintage comic books and placed them on the nightstand. Gabriel laid Leo gently on the bed. The paramedics bustled in to set up the portable IV stand and the monitors, their equipment beeping rhythmically in the quiet room. Gabriel retreated to the doorway, hovering in the shadows. He didn't want to crowd the room. He could smell the sickness on the boy, a sharp, chemical acridity that made his nose itch. It was the scent of a battle being fought on a cellular level. Norah was bustling around, tucking Leo in, checking the lines, murmuring soft reassurances. "Is the monster staying?" Leo asked, his voice sleepy but curious. Norah froze. "Leo, that's not polite." "It's okay," Gabriel said from the door. "I am staying. I patrol the halls." Leo looked at him with heavy eyelids. "To keep the bad guys out?" "Yes," Gabriel said. "Nothing gets past me. Not the bad guys, not the nightmares." Leo seemed satisfied with that. Within minutes, the exhaustion of the move claimed him, and his breathing evened out into a deep sleep. Norah ushered the paramedics out, then returned to the room. She found Gabriel pacing in the hallway, running his hand along the doorframe of Leo's room, just as he had done with hers. "What are you doing?" she whispered, closing the door softly. "Scent marking," Gabriel admitted, not stopping. "I'm weaving a perimeter. Any wolf that comes near this hallway will smell an alpha's claim. They will know that everything in these rooms is mine." He stopped and looked at her. "He smells very sick, Norah. The chemo scent is strong." "I know," she said, leaning against the wall, the adrenaline finally leaving her. "But he's a fighter. He just needs rest and safety." "He is safe here," Gabriel vowed. "I have guards posted at the main gate, human ones, heavily armed, and I will take the night watch myself." "You need to sleep, Gabriel. Your leg—" "My leg is fine," he lied. He stepped closer to her. In the dim light of the sconces, the intimacy of the hallway felt overwhelming. They were co-conspirators, parents guarding a nest. "You brought him into my world. That makes him Pack, and Pack protects the pups." Norah looked up at him. The gratitude she felt was so intense it hurt. She reached out and took his hand, the one that clawed the rogue, the one that carried her brother. "You're a good man, Gabriel Thorne," she whispered. Gabriel flinched, a shadow crossing his face. "Don't call me that. A good man wouldn't have enemies who threaten children." "Then be a bad man," she said fiercely. "Be the monster they're afraid of. Just be our monster." Gabriel stared at her. The possessiveness in her voice, "our monster," snapped something into place in his chest. "Always," he swore. Chapter 27. The Watch. Night settled over Blackwood Hall. The wind howled outside, scratching at the windows like a living thing trying to get in. Gabriel did not sleep. He pulled a heavy armchair into the hallway, positioning it so he could see both Norah's door and Leo's door. He sat there in the dark, a shotgun resting across his knees, a concession to his human form's limitations, though he preferred his claws. Around 3 a.m., the door to Leo's room creaked open. Gabriel was on his feet instantly, moving silently despite his bulk. A small head peered out. Leo. He was clutching a stuffed bear, looking terrifyingly small in the vast, shadowed corridor. "Mr. Dragon?" he whispered. Gabriel knelt on one knee, lowering himself to the boy's eye level. "It's Gabriel, Leo. What's wrong?" "I heard a noise outside, like a big dog." Gabriel stiffened. He listened. His hearing stretched out, past the walls, past the wind. He heard it, a howl, distant but distinct. It wasn't a challenge howl, it was a scouting howl. Marcus's mercenaries were probing the edges of the property again. "It's just the wind," Gabriel lied smoothly. "This old house makes strange noises. It grumbles because it's cold." Leo hesitated. Can I sit with you? Just for a minute? The room is too big." Gabriel looked at the boy. He should say no. He should send him back to bed. He was a dangerous creature. He shouldn't be near a child. But the boy was shivering. "Okay," Gabriel said, "but you need a blanket." He went into the room, grabbed the quilt from the bed, and wrapped it around Leo. Then he sat back in the armchair and lifted Leo onto his knee. The boy settled against Gabriel's chest without hesitation, resting his bald head against the spot where Gabriel's heart beat a slow, powerful rhythm. "You're warm," Leo mumbled, "like a radiator." "Like in metabolism," Gabriel almost said, but stopped himself. "I run hot." They sat in silence for a long time. Gabriel kept one hand on the boy's back, rubbing slow, soothing circles. The other hand rested on the gun. "Norah says you're sad," Leo said suddenly, his voice sleepy. Gabriel paused. "Did she?" "Yeah, she said you got hurt in a fire and now you're sad, but she said sadness is just love with nowhere to go." Gabriel felt a lump form in his throat. Love with nowhere to go. "Your sister is very wise," Gabriel whispered. "She's bossy," Leo corrected, "but she's brave. She fought the dragon for the gold, remember?" "I remember." "Are you the dragon she fought?" Gabriel looked down at the sleeping boy. He thought about the first day, the fear in Norah's eyes, the way she had stood her ground in the library. "Yes," Gabriel whispered into the darkness. "I am the dragon, but I think she won." Leo didn't answer. He was asleep. He held him, listening to the wind and the distant howls. For the first time in 3 years, the darkness didn't feel empty. It felt full. It felt like he had something to defend. And God help anyone who tried to cross that threshold tonight.
Chapter 28. The Sleeping Dragon. Dawn broke over Blackwood Hall with a deceptive stillness. The wind had died down, leaving a heavy blanket of mist clinging to the trees. Norah woke with a start. The silence in her room was absolute, which terrified her. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing her robe, her heart pounding with the instant panic of a caregiver. "Leo!" She threw open the door to the hallway. She stopped dead. The armchair Gabriel had dragged into the corridor was occupied. Gabriel was sprawled in it, his head tipped back against the upholstery, his mouth slightly open in deep sleep. His shotgun lay across his lap, held loosely in one massive hand. But he wasn't alone. Curled up on Gabriel's chest, wrapped in the quilt like a burrito, was Leo. The boy's head was tucked under Gabriel's chin, rising and falling in perfect rhythm with the alpha's deep breaths. One of Gabriel's hands, the scarred one, was resting protectively on Leo's back, the fingers splayed wide enough to cover the boy's entire torso. Norah pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. The image was devastatingly tender, the beast and the boy, the monster and the fragile thing. She took a step forward, the floorboard creaking. Gabriel's eyes snapped open. There was no grogginess, no moment of confusion. 1 second he was asleep, the next his green eyes were scanning the hallway, the amber glow of the wolf flaring instantly. His hand tightened on the shotgun. "It's me,"
Norah whispered, raising her hands. It's just me. Gabriel blinked, the amber fading. He looked down at his chest, seemingly realizing for the first time that he was being used as a mattress. He migrated, Gabriel rumbled, his voice gravelly with sleep. During the night. He said the bed was cold. And you let him stay? Asked Norah, walking closer, her heart swelling so much it hurt. He stopped shivering, Gabriel said simply. Pack warmth. Leo stirred, stretching. He blinked up at Gabriel. Morning, Mr. Dragon. Did we fight the bad guys? We kept them away, Gabriel corrected gently. But now you need to go back to your room. Mrs. Higgins will be bringing breakfast, and she gets grumpy if she finds people sleeping in the hallway. Leo yawned and slid off Gabriel's lap. He looked at Norah. Norah, Gabriel is warmer than the heater. You should try it. Norah flushed crimson. Gabriel looked away, a faint reddish hue appearing on his scarred cheekbones. Go wash up, Leo, Norah said quickly. As Leo scuttled into his room, Gabriel groaned, trying to stand. He stiffened, a hiss of pain escaping his teeth. The knight in the chair had locked his hip joint. Don't move, Norah said, rushing to his side. She grabbed his arm to support him. I'm fine, he grunted, sweating. Just stiffness. You sat in a wooden chair for 6 hours guarding my brother, Norah said, looking up at him fiercely. You are not fine, but you are wonderful. Gabriel looked down at her. The morning light filtered through the dusty window, catching the gold in her eyes. The pull of the mate bond surged, a warm golden tether wrapping around his heart. I am not wonderful, Norah, he whispered, his voice dark. I am a weapon you are learning to aim. Don't confuse utility with virtue. I know what I see, she countered, squeezing his arm. Now, come on, let's get some coffee. We have a lawyer to destroy.
Chapter 29. The Bleeding Ledger. The domestic peace of the morning shattered the moment they entered the library. The war room was exactly as they had left it, chaos. Norah poured the coffee, black, strong, while Gabriel paced. He walked the perimeter of the room, limping less as the movement warmed his joints. Blackfang, Gabriel muttered. If Marcus has hired Blackfang, he isn't just planning a coup. He's planning a slaughter. Those mercenaries don't take prisoners. Then we need to find where they are, Norah said, booting up the laptop. Mercenaries need to eat, they need to sleep, and wolves need space to run. She opened the spreadsheet she had been building. I tracked the shipments from the shell company Apex Masonry. They aren't going to the main house. They're being delivered to a secondary address on the estate grounds, the North Lodge. Gabriel stopped pacing. He went very still. The North Lodge? He repeated hollowly. You know it? It was my father's hunting cabin, Gabriel said. It's deep in the woods, near the gorge. It's been abandoned for a decade. It has underground kennels, soundproofed. Kennels, Norah whispered. That's where he's keeping the rogues. He's building a pack right under my nose, Gabriel growled, his hands curled into fists, claws punching through the skin of his palms. On my land, in my father's house? The rage spiked. The silver veins on his neck pulsed black. He slammed his fist into the bookshelf, shattering the wood. Gabriel! Norah stood up. I have to go there, he snarled, turning toward the door. I have to burn it down. I have to kill them all. You can't! Norah ran to block his path. You said there are dozens of them. You're one man, Gabriel, one injured man. If you walk into a den of Blackfang mercenaries, you won't come back. I am the Alpha, he roared, looking down at her with glowing amber eyes. I do not hide while rats infest my home. You're not hiding, Norah shouted back, grabbing his lapels. You're strategizing. If you die, Marcus wins. If you die, Leo dies. Is that what you want? The mention of Leo was the bucket of ice water he needed. Gabriel shuddered, the amber fading slightly. He leaned his forehead against the doorframe, breathing heavily. I hate this, he whispered. I hate being weak. You're not weak, Norah said softly, her hands resting on his chest, right over the thundering heart. You're poisoned. There's a difference. She guided him back to the chair. Sit. We know where they are.
That's step one, but we can't hit them alone. You said you exiled your pack, your loyal guards. Gabriel nodded, staring at the floor. Do you know where they are? Norah asked. I know where I sent them, to the city, to live as humans, to keep them safe from my rage. Then we call them back, Norah said firmly. We call the Cavalry. They won't come, Gabriel said bitterly. I tried to kill them, Norah. The last time I saw Jax, my Gamma, I threw him through a wall. If they are loyal, Norah said, picking up his phone and holding it out to him, we'll understand. Call them. Tell them the king is back, and tell them he needs his knights.
Chapter 30. The Pack Returns. Gabriel stared at the phone for a long time. His thumb hovered over the contact named Jax. He hadn't spoken to Jax in 3 years. Jax had been the one to drag him out of the fire. Jax had been the one to hold him down while the doctors scrubbed the silver from his skin. And Jax had been the one Gabriel had attacked in a silver-induced psychosis, nearly ripping his throat out. He will hate me, Gabriel thought. He should hate me. But then he looked at the door to the hallway, where Leo was sleeping. He looked at Norah, who was watching him with unwavering faith. He pressed the call button. It rang once, twice. Hello? A voice answered, gruff, wary, background noise of traffic. Gabriel's throat closed up. He couldn't speak. Who is this? The voice demanded sharply. I don't have time for spam calls. Jax, Gabriel rasped. Silence. Dead silence on the other end. Alpha? Jax's voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't angry, it was stunned. Gabriel struggled, his pride fighting with his desperation. I have a situation. Marcus, Blackfang, they are at the North Lodge. We know, Jax said immediately. Gabriel blinked. You know? We've been watching the city borders, Gabriel, Jax said, his voice thick with emotion. We couldn't get close to the estate because of the blood wards you keyed to our signatures. You locked us out to save us, but we never left. We've been waiting for the call. We don't abandon the Alpha just because he throws a tantrum. Gabriel let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Tears pricked his eyes. Hot, shameful tears. I thought I broke the bond. You can't break a blood oath, Alpha, Jax said. We're in the city, 10 of us. The rest are scattered, but we can rally them. I need you, Gabriel admitted, the hardest words he had ever spoken. I need help. I can't fight them alone. The silver. Say no more, Jax said. We're on our way. ETA 20 minutes. Open the gates. Gabriel hung up. He looked at Norah. He looked like a man who had just been granted a stay of execution. They stayed, he whispered. They were watching over me the whole time. Because you're worth watching over, Norah said, smiling. 20 minutes later, the sound of motorcycles roared up the driveway. Gabriel and Norah stood on the front steps. The gates opened and 5 bikes tore up the asphalt. They skidded to a halt in front of the house. The riders dismounted. They were big men and women wearing leather jackets with the Blackwood crest patched over. The leader, a man with a shaved head and a scar across his nose, stepped forward. Jax. Gabriel walked down the steps. He left his cane behind. He forced himself to walk tall, ignoring the agony in his hip. He stopped in front of Jax. Jax looked him up and down. He looked at the scars. He smelled the air, smelling the sickness, but also smelling the new scent, Norah. You look like hell, Alpha, Jax grinned. You're late, Gabriel managed to say, his voice thick. Jax laughed and pulled Gabriel into a bear hug. It was rough, violent affection. Gabriel stiffened for a second, his instincts screaming threat. But Norah stepped closer, her scent washing over him, calming the spike. Gabriel relaxed. He hugged his Gamma back. Welcome home, Gabriel whispered. Jax pulled back and looked at Norah. He smelled the air loudly. Human, Jax noted, surprised. And she smells like you. She is the manager, Gabriel said, his tone warning Jax not to push. And she is the reason I haven't burned the house down. Jax nodded respectfully at Norah. Ma'am. Jax, Norah said, nodding back. Nice bikes.
Do they have guns? Jax's grin widened. Oh, I like her. Yes, ma'am. We brought the whole armory and a military-grade satellite uplink. We know Marcus likes to jam local signals, so we brought our own grid. Gabriel looked at his team. 5 loyal wolves, a human strategist, and a dragon with a grudge. Good, Gabriel said, his eyes glowing amber, because tonight we take back the lodge.
Chapter 31. Iron and Silk. The library had transformed from a quiet refuge into a command center. Maps of the estate were spread across the desk, weighed down by ammunition clips and coffee mugs. Jax and his 4 lieutenants stood around the table, looking grim. They were a rough crew, scars, tattoos, and the distinct, restless energy of apex predators confined indoors. But when Gabriel spoke, they went still as statues. The lodge is isolated, Gabriel said, tracing a line on the map with a claw-tipped finger. 1 road in, 1 road out. The woods around it are dense, perfect for an ambush. Blackfang mercenaries are human, Jax noted, cleaning a massive handgun, but they use silver bullets, and they know how to hunt us. If we go in howling, they'll mow us down before we breach the perimeter. We don't go in howling, Gabriel said. We go in as ghosts. Jax, take the east flank. Sarah and Cole take the west. I will take the front door. With respect, Alpha, Sarah, a lithe woman with a braid down her back, spoke up. You're injured. You shouldn't be on point. I'm the distraction, Gabriel growled. They want the king? I'll give them the king. While they focus fire on me, you flank them and rip the throat out of their operation. Norah stood in the corner, arms crossed, listening. She felt out of place among these warriors, yet strangely essential. She saw the way they looked at Gabriel, with worry. He can't take silver rounds, Norah said, her voice cutting through the testosterone in the room. The wolves turned to look at her. His healing factor is compromised, Norah continued, stepping up to the table. She pointed to Gabriel's bandaged arm. That bite is 3 days old, and it's still bleeding. If he gets shot with silver, he won't just be down, he'll be dead. Jax looked at Gabriel, then at Norah. She's right, Alpha. You're a glass cannon right now. You hit hard, but you break easy. You have a handler now, Jax grinned, winking at Norah. Listen to her. Gabriel glared at Jax, but the anger didn't have any heat. He looked at Norah. Fine, he conceded. I wear the vest, and I stay behind the shield wall until the heavy fire is suppressed. Good, Norah said. Gabriel walked over to her. He reached behind the desk and pulled out a sleek, matte black shotgun. He held it out to her. You stay here. You lock the doors. You take Leo into the panic room in the basement, and if anyone comes through that door who isn't me or Jax, I shoot them, Norah finished, taking the heavy weapon. It felt cold and terrifying in her hands. You don't hesitate, Gabriel said, gripping her shoulder. His eyes burned into hers. You protect the pup. You are the last line of defense. I know, she whispered. Come back, Gabriel. Don't be a hero, just be a survivor. Gabriel leaned down. For a second, she thought he would kiss her again. The memory of the ballroom kiss hovered between them, electric and unresolved. But he pulled back, mindful of his audience. I always come back, he promised. He walked to the umbrella stand by the door and left his wooden cane there. In its place, he pulled out a rod of polished, heavy steel, a weapon disguised as a crutch. He turned to his pack. Let's hunt. Chapter 32. Blood on the Moon. The North Lodge was a shadow against the tree line, dark and silent, but the silence was a lie. Gabriel could smell them, human sweat, gun oil, and the acrid scent of wolfsbane. He crouched in the underbrush 50 yards from the porch, the Kevlar vest tight across his chest. Jax was to his left, silent as a wraith. 3 guards on the porch, Jax signaled with a hand motion. 2 on the roof. Gabriel nodded. He closed his eyes, reaching for the wolf inside. Usually, the silver made this painful, but tonight, the wolf was focused. It knew the stakes. Protect mate. Protect territory.
Go, Gabriel whispered into his comms. The attack was synchronized violence. Jax and Cole moved like blurs. They didn't shift. Shifting took too long. They used their supernatural speed. 2 guards on the porch went down before they could even scream, dragged into the darkness of the bushes. The roof guards spotted the movement. Contact! Gunfire erupted. Bang, bang, bang. Flashes of light tore through the darkness. Bullets chewed up the dirt around Gabriel. Now, Gabriel roared. He broke cover. He didn't run. He charged. He moved with a terrifying momentum, ignoring the pain in his hip. A mercenary stepped out the front door, raising a rifle. Gabriel didn't slow down. He swung his cane, a heavy, steel-reinforced rod he had swapped for the wooden one, and cracked the man across the jaw. The mercenary dropped like a stone. Gabriel kicked the door in. The wood splintered inward. Inside, the lodge was a barracks. Cots were overturned as mercenaries scrambled for weapons. "Clear the room!" Jax shouted, diving through a window, glass shattering. Gabriel moved through the chaos like a storm. A man lunged at him with a knife. Gabriel caught his wrist, twisted it with Lycan strength until bones snapped, and tossed the man aside. Another mercenary leveled a shotgun. Gabriel saw the muzzle flash. He twisted, but not fast enough. The spray of buckshot hit his left shoulder. The Kevlar stopped the penetration, but the impact was like a sledgehammer. Gabriel was thrown back against the wall, the wind knocked out of him. Pain flared, white-hot and blinding. "Alpha!" Sarah screamed, tackling the shooter. Gabriel slid down the wall, gasping, his vision blurred. The silver in his blood reacted to the trauma, spiking his heart rate. The wolf roared, trying to take over, trying to force a shift to heal the damage. No, Gabriel thought, gritting his teeth. Sanctuary, focus on sanctuary. He pictured Norah. He pictured her hands on his face. Good boy. The rage receded just enough. He forced air into his lungs. He grabbed his cane and stood up. "I'm fine," he bellowed, his voice shaking the rafters. "Press the attack." The pack rallied. Within minutes, the gunfire died down, replaced by the groans of defeated men. "Clear!" Jax yelled from the kitchen. "Clear!" Cole yelled from the loft. Gabriel stood in the center of the room, chest heaving. The floor was slick with blood and debris. They had taken the lodge. "Secure the prisoners," Gabriel ordered, wiping sweat from his eyes, "and find out what Marcus was keeping here."
Chapter 33. The Madman's Lab. The basement of the lodge was not a kennel. It was a laboratory. Gabriel limped down the wooden stairs, Jax flanking him with a flashlight. The air down here was cold and smelled of antiseptic and ozone, the same smell Gabriel associated with hospitals, but sharper. "What the hell is this?" Jax whispered, sweeping the beam across the room. Tables were lined with equipment, centrifuges, microscopes, and rows of vials filled with a glowing blue liquid. Along the back wall were cages, heavy, reinforced steel cages. Inside one, a figure huddled. It was a wolf, but it looked wrong. Its fur was patchy, falling out in clumps. Its eyes were wide and milky, staring at nothing. It was drooling, a thick, viscous foam. Gabriel approached the cage slowly. "Hello, brother," he whispered. The wolf snapped, throwing itself against the bars with a mindless fury. It didn't recognize alpha authority. It was purely feral. "It's broken," Jack said, horrified. "Its mind is gone." Gabriel looked at the clipboard hanging on the cage door. He snatched it down. Subject 14, Injection Series, Silver Nitrate Hybrid. Objective, Induced Feral State for Weaponization. Gabriel felt sick. He handed the clipboard to Jax. "He's not just hiring mercenaries," Gabriel said, his voice trembling with rage. "He's experimenting on wolves. He's injecting them with silver to drive them insane, to turn them into biological weapons." "The rogue I fought in the garden," Gabriel realized, his eyes widening. The strength, the lack of self-preservation. It wasn't a scout. It was a test subject. Marcus sent it to see if I could kill a silver-maddened wolf.
Because he wants to prove you're weak. Or maybe he wants to prove that you are the monster. Gabriel looked at the rows of blue vials. This is his endgame. He creates a pack of feral monsters, releases them on the city or the council, and then blames it on my instability. He claims I lost control and turned my pack. It's a frame-up, a massacre waiting to happen. Burn it, Gabriel ordered. Alpha? Take the hard drives, take the samples for evidence, but burn the lab, burn the cages. I won't let this abomination exist on my land. He turned to leave, but stopped when he saw a corkboard on the far wall. It was covered in surveillance photos. Gabriel walked over. There were photos of him entering the obsidian tower, photos of the rogue attack, and in the center, circled in red marker, were photos of Norah. Norah walking to the car, Norah at the grocery store, Norah through the window of the West Wing bedroom, and next to her photo, a printed note, Target, Catalyst, removed to induce alpha collapse. Gabriel stared at the photo. The fear that gripped him was colder than the silver. Marcus wasn't just threatening Leo to make Norah quit. He was planning to take Norah to break Gabriel completely. Jax, Gabriel said, his voice deadly calm. Yeah, Alpha? We're done playing defense. Pack up, we're moving everyone to the main house, tonight. And then, Gabriel said, ripping the photo of Norah off the wall and crushing it in his fist. We hunt down Marcus, and I show him what a real monster looks like.
Chapter 34. Return to the Nest. The smell of smoke clung to Gabriel like a second skin. It was a thick, oily scent, burning plastic and scorched earth that mixed with the coppery tang of fresh blood. He rode in the back of Jax's SUV, the North Lodge burning in the rearview mirror like a funeral pyre. His hip was screaming, the adrenaline crash hitting him harder this time, but he refused to show weakness. Status, Gabriel grunted, looking at his phone. No signal. We're dark, Alpha, Jax said from the driver's seat. Marcus likely jammed the local towers the moment we breached the lodge. He knows we hit him. Good, Gabriel said, staring out at the passing trees. Let him panic. They roared through the gates of Blackwood Hall. The house was dark, locked down tight. Gabriel was out of the car before it fully stopped. He moved up the steps, ignoring the protests of his injured leg. He keyed the code into the security pad. The heavy door hissed open. Norah! He bellowed, his voice echoing in the silent foyer. Basement! Her voice came back, muffled but clear. Gabriel limped to the heavy steel door of the panic room disguised as a wine cellar entrance. He punched in the code. The bolts retracted with a heavy thunk. The door swung open. Norah sat on a crate of vintage Bordeaux, the shotgun resting across her knees. Her face was pale, her eyes wide in the harsh fluorescent light of the bunker. Beside her, Leo was asleep on a cot, wearing noise-canceling headphones. When she saw Gabriel, blood spattered, smelling of fire, his vest torn, she dropped the gun and scrambled to her feet. You're back, she breathed. I told you, I always come back, Gabriel said, stepping into the room and closing the distance between them. He didn't care about the blood on his coat. He pulled her into a crushing hug, burying his face in her neck. He needed to smell her. He needed to replace the scent of the feral wolves and the chemical lab with the scent of lilac and life. Are you hurt? She asked, her hands frantically patting his chest, checking for wounds. I heard shooting. Distant, but so much shooting. I'm fine, he lied. We took the lodge. We burned the lab. He pulled back, keeping his hands on her shoulders. His expression was grave. Norah, we found something. Photos. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled picture he had torn from the wall. He smoothed it out against his chest. Norah looked at it. It was a picture of her, taken through a telephoto lens while she was grocery shopping in the village. The red circle around her face looked like a target. She was watching me, she whispered, a chill running through her. He identified you as the catalyst, he said, his voice low and vibrating with suppressed rage. He knows you are the reason I am regaining control. He knows you are the key to the wolf.
Norah stared at the photo. Fear flared, cold and sharp, but then she looked at Leo sleeping peacefully on the cot. "So I'm a target?" she said, looking up at Gabriel. "You are the target," he corrected, "which means you do not leave my sight, not for a second. Jax and the pack are setting up a perimeter around the main house now. We are under siege, Norah." "Okay," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Then let's go upstairs. I can't protect anyone from a wine cellar."
Chapter 35. The Council's Evidence. The kitchen of Blackwood Hall had become a triage center and a data processing hub. Jack sat at a large island, his laptop connected to a satellite modem they had dug out of storage. "Alpha, the jammer is strong, but the satellite uplink is punching through. Slow, but steady." "Upload everything," Gabriel ordered. He was sitting at the head of the table, allowing Norah to clean the soot from his face with a warm cloth. The photos of the cages, the chemical formulas, the feral test subjects. "Who are we sending it to?" Jax asked, typing furiously. "The Council," Gabriel said, "specifically Alpha Kale." "Kale?" Norah paused, the cloth hovering near his cheek. "The fat one who insulted me at the gala?" "He's an ass," Gabriel admitted, "but he's a traditionalist. He hates rogues, and he hates science interfering with the bloodlines. If he sees Marcus is creating artificial Lycans, he will call for Marcus's head on a pike." "Upload complete in 5 minutes," Jax announced. Norah finished cleaning Gabriel's face. She looked at the group of wolves gathered in her kitchen. There were 10 of them now, reinforcements having arrived within the hour. They were big, loud, and ate everything in the pantry, but they were gentle with Leo. The boy was sitting at the far end of the table, showing a female wolf named Sarah his Lego Millennium Falcon. Sarah, who had a scar running through her eyebrow and looked like she could bench press a truck, was listening with rapt attention. "And this is the hyperdrive. It makes them go light steed." "It does it now," Sarah grinned, glancing at Gabriel. "We could use one of those, Alpha." "We have something better," Gabriel murmured, looking at Norah. "We have the truth." Just then, the lights flickered. The hum of the refrigerator died. The laptop screen went black. The overhead lights sizzled and popped, plunging the kitchen into gray twilight. "Power cut," Jax announced instantly, his hand going to the gun on his hip. "The generator should kick in," Norah said, looking at the ceiling. They waited. 1 second, 2 seconds. Silence. "He cut the line," Gabriel growled, standing up, "and he sabotaged the backup." "He's here," Jack said, sniffing the air. "I smell ozone." "Alpha," Sarah called out from the window. "Movement at the tree line, a lot of movement." Gabriel moved to the window, staying in the shadows. He looked out. The woods were alive. Dozens of shapes were moving through the mist. They weren't moving like a coordinated military unit. They were moving erratically, twitching, snapping at the air. "Ferals," Gabriel whispered. "He released the test subjects." "How many?" Jax asked, coming up beside him. 30, maybe 40. "Against 10 of us?" Jax grimaced. "And these things don't feel pain, Alpha. They fight until you chop their heads off." Gabriel turned back to the room. Leo was looking around, scared by the sudden darkness. "Norah," Gabriel commanded, "take Leo. Go to the library. It has the thickest doors and no ground floor windows. Sarah, go with them. You are their shadow." "What about you?" Norah asked, grabbing Leo's hand. Gabriel picked up his cane, the heavy, steel one. His eyes began to glow, the amber light cutting through the gloom of the kitchen. "I am going to hold the door. Jax, rally the pack. We defend the house. No one gets inside." Chapter 36. The First Wave. The sun had set, and with the power out, Blackwood Hall was a tomb of shadows. Gabriel stood in the center of the grand foyer. The double doors were barred, furniture piled against them, but the wood was groaning under the assault from the outside. Thud, thud, thud. Bodies were throwing themselves against the entrance. "They're testing the barricade," Jack said, standing on the landing above with a rifle. "They aren't thinking, they're just swarming." "Marcus is directing them," Gabriel said, his voice calm, cold. "He's watching. He wants us to waste our ammo on the ferals so his mercenaries can clean up the scraps." Crash.
The drawing room window shattered. "Breach!" Cole yelled from the east hallway. "East wing, 3 entered." "Hold them!" Gabriel roared. He moved toward the east hallway. He didn't run, he stalked. The pain in his hip was gone, drowned out by the call to war. A feral wolf, hairless, covered in sores, eyes glowing a sick, chemical yellow, came skidding around the corner. It saw Gabriel and snarled, drool dripping from its jaws. It lunged. Gabriel didn't shift. He planted his feet and swung the steel cane like a baseball bat. Crack! The heavy metal struck the feral's skull mid-air. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the hall. The creature crumpled, twitching. But 2 more were behind it. "Alpha, left!" Jax shouted, firing from the stairs. A bullet took one feral in the shoulder, but it didn't stop. It scrambled over its fallen packmate, snapping at Gabriel's legs. Gabriel dropped the cane and grabbed the wolf by the throat with his bare hand. His claws extended, puncturing the thick skin. He roared, lifting the 100-pound beast into the air and slamming it into the wall. The plaster cracked. The wolf went limp. "They're stronger than normal wolves," Gabriel shouted, shaking his hand to clear the numbness. "The adrenaline makes them hit like trucks." "We can't hold the perimeter, Alpha." Cole's voice came over the radio, panicked. "There's too many. They're coming through the kitchen windows." Gabriel looked up the stairs. The library was on the 2nd floor. Norah and Leo were there. If the ground floor fell, the stairs were the only choke point. "Retreat," Gabriel bellowed. "Pull back to the stairs. We hold the high ground." He backed up, grabbing his cane. He watched as his wolves retreated from the hallways, firing into the darkness. "Upstairs, move." Jax and the others scrambled up the grand staircase. Gabriel was the last one. He stood at the bottom step looking into the darkness of his own home. Dozens of yellow eyes blinked back at him from the shadows of the foyer. Low, wet growls filled the air. "Come and get it," Gabriel snarled. He turned and limped up the stairs. As he reached the landing, he kicked the heavy antique wardrobe they had pre-positioned there. It toppled down the stairs with a deafening crash, blocking the path with a mountain of mahogany and shattered glass. It wouldn't stop them forever, but it would buy them time. He turned and ran to the library. Norah! She was there, huddled in the corner with Leo, Sarah standing guard with a drawn sword. "They're inside," Norah whispered, looking at Gabriel's bloodied hands. "Yes," Gabriel said, locking the heavy doors behind him. "But we have the high ground, and we have the satellite uplink." He looked at the laptop on the desk. The progress bar was frozen at 99%. "Come on," Gabriel urged, staring at the screen. "Send the damn file." Outside the door, the sound of claws scratching against wood began. Chapter 37. The Upload. The library doors shook violently on their hinges. Outside, in the hallway, the feral wolves were throwing themselves against the heavy oak, scratching and biting at the wood. It sounded like a storm of claws. Inside, the silence was thick with tension. Norah sat on the floor under the desk, her arms wrapped tight around Leo. The boy was wearing the noise-canceling headphones, his eyes squeezed shut, clutching his stuffed bear. Sarah stood over them, a sword in one hand and a handgun in the other, her face grim. 99%, Jax shouted, staring at the laptop screen. "Come on, come on." "The door won't hold much longer," Gabriel said. He was standing in the center of the room, stripped to his shirt sleeves, his hands bandaged and bloody. He held the steel cane like a broadsword. "They're chewing through the frame." "Done," Jax yelled. "File sent. Confirmation received." Almost instantly, the satellite phone on the desk rang. Its shrill chirp cut through the sound of the splintering wood. Gabriel snatched it up. "Thorne." "You have some explaining to do, Alpha," a deep voice boomed over the speaker. It was Kale. "Did you see the files?" Gabriel demanded. "Did you see the labs?" "I saw them," Kale growled. "Abominations. Artificial wolves. It's a violation of the blood laws. If Marcus is behind this—" "He is here," Gabriel said, looking at the door as a hinge popped loose with a screech of metal. "He has 30 ferals and a squad of Black Fang mercenaries at my door. We are tracked in the library. We need support." "Enforcers are airborne," Kale said. "We are 20 minutes out. Can you hold?" 20 minutes? Gabriel laughed darkly. "Kale, I have 5 wolves and a human child. We might not last 30 seconds. "Hold the line, Thorne," Cale commanded. "If you die before I get to kill Marcus myself, I will resurrect you just to beat your ass." The line went dead. Gabriel looked at his pack. They were battered, bleeding, and outnumbered. 20 minutes, Gabriel announced. "The council is coming. We just have to survive until the cavalry arrives." Boom! An explosion rocked the house. Dust rained down from the ceiling. "That wasn't a wolf," Cole coughed, waving away plaster dust. "Breaching charge," Gabriel realized, his blood running cold. "The mercenaries are setting explosives on the door. If they blow it, the shockwave alone will kill everyone in this room." He looked at Norah. She was looking back at him, terrified but steady. She knew. "I have to open the door," Gabriel said softly. "No!" Norah cried out, scrambling out from under the desk. "If you open it, they swarm us." "If I don't, they blow us up," Gabriel countered, his voice calm. "I am the Alpha. It is my privilege to bleed for the pack."
Chapter 38. The Alpha's Last Stand. The plan was suicide, and everyone in the room knew it. Jax tried to argue. Sarah tried to take his place, but Gabriel silenced them with a single look, the glowing amber gaze of a king giving a final order. "Barricade the door behind me," Gabriel commanded. "Do not open it until you hear Cale's voice. Understand?" "Yes, Alpha," Jax whispered, tears tracking through the soot on his face. Gabriel turned to Norah. She wasn't crying. She was vibrating with a fierce, angry energy. "You come back," she ordered, gripping his lapels. "You promised. You said you always come back." "I will try," Gabriel said. He leaned down and kissed her, hard, fast, and desperate. It tasted of goodbye. He pulled away, grabbed his steel cane, and walked to the double doors. "Ready?" Jax asked. "Ready." Jax unlocked the deadbolt. He threw the door open. Gabriel stepped out onto the landing. The hallway was a nightmare. The air was thick with smoke. Feral wolves were climbing over the wreckage of the wardrobe on the stairs. At the top of the landing, 5 men in tactical gear, Black Fang mercenaries, were setting charges on the doorframe. They froze when Gabriel stepped out. "Evening, gentlemen," Gabriel snarled. He didn't give them time to react. He swung the cane. It caught the nearest mercenary in the chest, crushing his ribs and sending him flying over the banister to the floor below. "Contact!" someone screamed. Gunfire erupted. Gabriel moved. He wasn't fast enough to dodge bullets, but he was too angry to feel them. He tackled the second mercenary, driving him into the wall. A feral wolf lunged at his back, sinking teeth into his shoulder. Gabriel roared, spinning around and throwing the wolf off. He was a whirlwind of violence. He used the cane, his fists, his teeth. "Push him back," a voice shouted from the stairs. Marcus. He stood halfway down the staircase, protected by a wall of flesh, 2 massive feral wolves. He looked immaculate in his suit, a stark contrast to the carnage around him. "Give it up, Gabriel," Marcus shouted. "You're bleeding out. Just die and save the girl the trauma of watching." Gabriel stood on the landing, chest heaving. He had taken 3 rounds to the chest, caught by the vest, breaking ribs, but a 4th had bypassed the armor, grazing his thigh, and another had clipped his ear. Blood poured down his face. The silver dust from the impacts was burning him alive. But he didn't fall. He planted his feet, blocking the path to the library. "You want them?" Gabriel bellowed, his voice distorted by the partial shift, his teeth elongating into fangs. "You have to go through me." "Fine," Marcus sighed. He snapped his fingers. The remaining ferals, 10 of them, surged up the stairs, a wave of teeth and claws. Gabriel dropped the cane. He spread his arms. He couldn't fight them all as a man. He had to shift. But if he shifted, the silver would drive him mad. He would kill the ferals. Then he would turn around and kill Jax. He would kill Norah. "Sanctuary," he thought desperately. "Good boy." He closed his eyes. He reached for the memory of Norah's touch, the smell of lilac, the feeling of her hand on his neck. "Anchor me." He let the wolf out, but he held the leash tight. Chapter 39. The True Monster.
The transformation was agony. Usually a shift was fluid. Bones rearranged, fur grew, and the man became the beast. But with the silver poisoning, it was like breaking every bone in his body with a hammer. Gabriel screamed as his spine cracked and elongated. The Kevlar vest snapped like a rubber band, shredding along with his shirt. He fell to his hands and knees on the blood-slicked floor. Fur erupted from his skin, black as night, matted with blood. His jaw shattered and reformed into a muzzle filled with razor-sharp ivory. He grew and grew. A normal wolf was large, an alpha was huge, but Gabriel was a monster. He stood nearly 5 feet at the shoulder, a massive engine of destruction. But his eyes, they weren't the mindless yellow of the ferals. They were green, deep, intelligent forest green. He hadn't lost his mind. Norah's imprint was stronger than the silver. She had grounded him so deeply that even in the shift, he knew who he was. I am Thorne. He roared, a sound that shook the dust from the chandeliers. The ferals faltered. Even in their madness, they recognized an apex predator. He lunged. It wasn't a fight, it was a massacre. He tore through the wave of ferals like a reaper, snapping necks with a single bite. He swiped with claws the size of steak knives, eviscerating anything foolish enough to come close. The Black Thing mercenaries opened fire. Bang, bang, bang. Silver bullets struck his flank. He didn't even slow down. The pain was fuel. The rage was armor. He cleared the landing. He cleared the top of the stairs. He looked down at Marcus. Marcus was backing away, his face pale. Shoot him! Aim for the head! But his mercenaries were dead or fleeing. Gabriel pulled a gun, a silver-plated Desert Eagle. He aimed at Gabriel's chest. Die, you abomination! Crack! The bullet hit Gabriel in the shoulder. He flinched, a yelp escaping his throat, but he didn't stop. He leaped. He cleared the remaining stairs in a single bound, landing on top of Marcus. The impact shattered the floor tiles. Gabriel pinned Marcus down with one massive paw, his claws digging into the expensive suit. Marcus screamed, dropping the gun. Gabriel lowered his massive head, snarling right in Marcus's face. Drool and blood dripped on the lawyer's cheek. Kill him, the wolf demanded. Rip his throat out. Gabriel tightened his grip. He could end it, one bite. Thwop, thwop, thwop. The sound of helicopter blades cut through the shattered windows. Spotlights flooded the foyer, blinding white light washing over the scene. This is the Council Enforcement Squad, a voice boomed from a loudspeaker outside. Surrender immediately. Gabriel froze. If he killed Marcus now, while the council watched, he would be branded a murderer. He would prove Marcus right, that he was an unstable beast. He looked at the library door, upstairs. He thought of Norah. He didn't kill Marcus. Instead, he roared right in his face, a sound of pure dominance that made Marcus wet himself in terror. Then Gabriel stepped off him. He sat on his haunches in the middle of the ruined foyer, surrounded by the bodies of the ferals, and waited for the enforcers to breach the door. He was bleeding, he was exhausted, and the silver was slowly eating him alive. But he had held the line. 20 minutes, exactly. Chapter 40. The Wolf's Anchor. The foyer of Blackwood Hall was blinded by the white beams of tactical lights. Dust and smoke swirled in the beams, creating a surreal, hazy atmosphere. Gabriel sat on his haunches in the center of the destruction, a towering black beast breathing in ragged, wet gasps. Blood, his own and others, matted his fur. He was surrounded by a ring of 12 council enforcers, all with weapons raised, fingers tense on the triggers. "Stand down, Alpha," one enforcer shouted, his voice shaking. Gabriel let out a low, warning growl. He was barely conscious. The silver bullets lodged in his flank were burning like coals. His vision was tunneling, but he wouldn't move. He sat at the base of the stairs, blocking the path to the library. No one passes. "Hold your fire," a booming voice commanded. Alpha Kale strode through the shattered front doors. He looked at the carnage, the broken bodies of the mercenaries, the pile of dead ferals, and the cowering figure of Marcus Reed, who was being cuffed by 2 guards. Kale looked at Gabriel. He saw the sheer size of the wolf, the unnatural green eyes, and the defensive posture. "He's protecting the upper floor," Kale realized aloud. "He won't let us pass. If we try to move him, he'll fight until he dies." "He's unstable, sir. Look at the tremors. The silver poisoning is critical." "He needs to shift back," Kale said grimly. "If he stays in that form with that much silver in him, his heart will explode. We need the handler." Kale looked up the stairs, past the barricade Gabriel had destroyed. "Miss Clark," Kale bellowed, "if you are alive, we need you down here, now." A moment later, the library doors creaked open. Norah stepped out onto the landing. She looked small, disheveled, covered in dust, but unhurt. She looked down at the scene. She saw the enforcers, she saw Kale, and then she saw him. The massive black wolf. He was terrifying, a creature from a nightmare. But when he saw her, his ears perked up. A soft whine escaped his throat, a sound of pure distress. Norah didn't hesitate. She ran down the stairs. "Miss Clark, be careful. He's in a trauma state." Norah ignored him. She pushed past a heavily armed enforcer and walked straight into the kill zone. She stopped inches from Gabriel's muzzle. He was panting, blood dripping from his jowls on the floor. He looked at her with those deep green eyes, eyes that were pleading for release. "Hi," she whispered, tears spilling over. "You did it. You held the line." Gabriel let out a huff of air, nudging her hand with his wet nose. "You have to come back now," she said, trembling. "The effort is over. You can let go." She reached out and placed both hands on his massive head, burying her fingers in the coarse fur behind his ears. She scratched gently, finding the spot he loved. "Sanctuary. Good boy." The tension left his massive frame instantly. He leaned into her touch, his eyes fluttering shut. Then the shift began. It was brutal. The sound of bones cracking echoed through the silent foyer. Gabriel collapsed, his body convulsing as the fur receded and the human form returned. He fell forward, naked and bloody, shivering violently on the cold tiles. Norah was there. She caught his head before it hit the floor, pulling him into her lap. She stripped off her own cardigan and draped it over his shoulders, shielding his dignity from the staring soldiers. "I've got you," she sobbed, rocking him. "I've got you." Gabriel opened his eyes. They were human, green, exhausted. "Did I?" he wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. "Did I save the gold?" Norah looked at Leo, who was peeking over the railing upstairs, safe and sound. "Yes," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "You saved the gold. You saved us all." Gabriel smiled, a weak, broken thing, and let the darkness take him.
Chapter 41. The Verdict. The recovery took weeks. Gabriel spent the first 10 days in a medically induced coma at the council's private hospital, while surgeons removed the silver fragments from his body and flushed the toxins from his blood. Norah didn't leave his side. She slept in the chair next to his bed, waking every time the monitors beeped. On the 11th day, he woke up. On the 12th day, Alpha Kale came to visit. The room was sunny, filled with flowers sent by the pack, Jax, Sarah, and the others who had reclaimed Blackwood Hall. Gabriel was sitting up, pale and thin, but alive. The scars on his face were still there, but the black veins of infection were gone. "You look less like a corpse than yesterday," Kale grunted, sitting in the visitor's chair. "High praise," Gabriel rasped. "Marcus is done," Kale said without preamble. "The tribunal reviewed the evidence you sent, the labs, the ferals. He's been stripped of his rank and sentenced to the silver mines for life. He won't see daylight again." Gabriel nodded slowly. "And the mercenaries?" "Disbanded.
Black Fang is being hunted down by the enforcers as we speak." Kale leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "The council owes you an apology, Thorne. We thought you were broken. We thought you were a liability." He looked at Norah, who was standing by the window, arranging a vase of lilies. "We didn't know you had found an anchor. A human anchor. It's unconventional. Some of the elders are grumbling about blood laws." "Let them grumble," Gabriel growled, his voice gaining a sudden sharp edge. "She is pack, she is mate. Anyone who has a problem with that can come to Blackwood and discuss it with me personally." Kale laughed, a deep, belly-shaking sound. "I figured you'd say that. I told them to shove it. You held off an army for 20 minutes while bleeding out silver. As far as I'm concerned, you can marry a cactus if you want to." He stood up, clapping Gabriel on the shoulder. "Heal up, Alpha. The North is quiet again, but it feels empty without the Blackwood King." Kale left. Silence settled in the room. Gabriel looked at Norah. She had stopped arranging the flowers and was looking at him with an unreadable expression. "Mate?" she repeated softly. Gabriel froze. He hadn't meant to say it so bluntly. "It's a wolf term," he said, looking at his hands. "It means partner, equal, the one the soul recognizes." "I know what it means," Norah said. She walked over to the bed. She sat on the edge, careful not to jostle his bandaged leg. She reached out and took his hand. His skin was cool, no longer burning with fever. "You almost died," she whispered. "When you went out that door, I thought I'd never see you again." "I had a reason to come back," Gabriel said, lacing these fingers with hers. He lifted her hand and pressed it to the scar on his cheek, the place where she had first touched him in the moonlight. "You are the only reason I am sane, Norah. You are the only reason I am alive. I know I'm a wreck. I know I come with a lifetime of baggage and scars. But," he took a deep breath, "I am yours. The wolf is yours. The man is yours, if you'll have us." Norah looked at him. She saw the fear in his eyes, the fear that she would finally come to her senses and run away from the monster. She leaned in and kissed him. It was soft, sweet, and filled with a promise of forever. "I think," she whispered against his lips, "I'm keeping the monster. He's very good at guarding the castle."
Chapter 42. Echoes of the Healed. 6 months later. Spring had finally come to Yorkshire. The purple heather was blooming on the moors, and the scaffolding was finally coming down from the front of Blackwood Hall. The stone had been scrubbed, the ivy trimmed, and the gargoyles no longer looked ominous. They looked like guardians. The gardens, once a tangle of dead thorns, were alive with color. Norah sat on the stone bench in the center of the garden, the same bench where she had first touched Gabriel under the moonlight. She was watching Leo. Her brother was running. He wasn't shuffling. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He was running across the lawn with Jax and Sarah, chasing a soccer ball. His hair had grown back, a thick mop of dark curls. His cheeks were pink. The new treatment protocol, fully funded by the Thorne estate, had worked miracles. He was in full remission. "He's fast," a deep voice said behind her. Gabriel stepped into view. He wasn't using the cane. He walked with a slight limp, a permanent reminder of the battle, but he was strong. He wore a simple button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the faint white scars of the bite marks on his arm. "He's cheating," Norah laughed, shading her eyes against the sun. "Jax is letting him win." "Jax is terrified of you," Gabriel smirked, sitting beside her. "He knows if he trips the boy, you'll put him on kitchen duty for a month." "Damn right I will." Gabriel wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. He inhaled the scent of her hair, still lilac, still rain, but now mixed with the scent of the pack. Home. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Nora's heart skipped a beat. "Gabriel." He opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond ring. It was a simple, heavy gold band, etched with tiny, intricate vines. "It's not an engagement ring," he said quickly, seeing her face. "Well,
Not just that, it's a pack ring. My mother wore one. It signifies that you are the heart of the pack, that you speak with my voice. He looked at her, his green eyes vulnerable. I want to marry you, Norah, eventually, when you're ready, but for now, I want everyone to know that you are the queen of this territory, that you tamed the beast. Norah looked at the ring. It was beautiful. It was heavy, like the gold in the story. I didn't tame you, she said, looking up at him. I just reminded you that you were human. No, Gabriel said, leaning in to kiss her. You loved me until I remembered I was worthy of it. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. So, he whispered against her lips, what does the knight do now that the dragon is slain? Norah smiled, looking out at her brother laughing in the sun, surrounded by a family of wolves that adored him. The knight doesn't retire, she said, leaning her head on Gabriel's shoulder. She lives happily ever after in the castle, with her dragon. Gabriel chuckled, a deep, happy rumble that vibrated through her chest. Good, he said, because the dragon isn't letting her go. Down on the lawn, Leo kicked the ball into the goal and threw his arms up in victory. And on the bench, under the warm spring sun, the man and the woman sat together, no longer fractured, but whole.
Chapter 43, 5 years later, The Winter King. The winter solstice had returned to Blackwood Hall, but the ghosts were gone. 5 years ago, this night had been a desperate gamble for survival. Tonight, it was a coronation of joy. The grand ballroom, once a cold cavern of judgment, was alive with warmth. Thousands of fairy lights draped from the crystal chandeliers, casting a golden glow over the 300 guests. The air didn't smell of fear or ozone. It smelled of roasted pine, spiced wine, and the rich communal scent of a thriving pack. Gabriel Thorne stood on the balcony overlooking the dance floor. He had aged well. The gray at his temples was distinguished, not premature. He stood without a cane, his posture commanding and effortless. The scars on the left side of his face were still there, white, jagged lines mapping his history, but he no longer hid them in the shadows. He wore them like medals. "You're brooding," a voice teased. Gabriel turned. Norah walked onto the balcony. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue velvet, her hair swept up in a diamond clip. She moved with the grace of a Luna, a woman who knew she owned every stone of this castle. "I'm not brooding," Gabriel corrected, reaching out to pull her against his chest. "I'm supervising. There is a difference." "Is that so? And what are you supervising?" "The perimeter," he said, nodding toward the edge of the ballroom. "Specifically the 15-year-old boy trying to sneak a glass of champagne near the punch bowl." Norah followed his gaze. Leo, tall, lanky, with a mop of unruly curls, was laughing with a group of teenagers from the neighboring pack. He looked healthy, radiant. There was no trace of the pale, sick boy who had been carried up the stairs in a blanket. "He's 15, Gabriel," Norah sighed, resting her head on his shoulder. "Let him have a sip. Jax is watching him like a hawk anyway." "Jax is a bad influence," Gabriel grumbled, though his expression softened. "He let Leo drive the motorcycle last week. I smelled the exhaust on him." "You taught him how to throw a knife when he was 12, Norah reminded him. "You don't get to talk about bad influences." Gabriel chuckled, the sound vibrating through his chest. He kissed the top of her head, inhaling the scent that had saved his life. Lilac, rain, and now mother. "Where is she?" Gabriel asked, scanning the room. "Sarah has her," Norah said. "She was demanding to see the Wolfies dance." As if on cue, a small squeal erupted from the center of the dance floor. A tiny girl, barely 4 years old, with Gabriel's black hair and Norah's fierce brown eyes, was spinning in circles while the terrifying beta Sarah clapped along. The girl was wearing a fluffy white dress that made her look like a cloud. "Beatrice," Gabriel whispered, a smile breaking across his face that would have terrified his old enemies with the sheer tenderness. "She's going to be a handful," Norah warned. "She already growled at the postman yesterday." "Good, she's an alpha's daughter. She knows her territory."
He looked down at his wife. 5 years. 5 years of rebuilding the pack, rebuilding his body, and rebuilding his soul. "Thank you," he whispered in her ear. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting the dragon." Norah turned in his arms, her hands resting on his chest, right over his heart. "The dragon wasn't so bad," she smiled. "He just needed a better horde to protect."
Chapter 44. The Heart of the Pack. The party wound down around 2 a.m. The guests departed, leaving the hall quiet but not empty. Blackwood Hall was full now, full of pack members who lived in the cottages on the grounds, full of staff, full of life. Gabriel carried a sleeping Beatrice up the grand staircase. Her head rested on his shoulder, a line of drool wetting his expensive tuxedo jacket. He didn't care. He would burn 1,000 tuxedos for this feeling. Norah walked beside him, holding his hand. They entered the nursery, a room that used to be a dusty storage closet, now painted a soft sage green. Gabriel laid his daughter in her bed, tucking the quilts around her. She stirred, clutching a worn-out stuffed wolf toy. "Daddy?" she mumbled. "I'm here, Bee," Gabriel whispered, brushing a curl from her forehead. "Check for monsters?" she asked sleepily. Gabriel smiled. It was their ritual. He stood up and walked to the closet. He opened it, made a show of checking behind the coats. He checked under the bed. He walked to the window and looked out at the moonlit grounds. "No monsters," Gabriel reported, returning to her side. The big wolf scared them all away. "Good," she sighed. "Good wolf." She drifted back to sleep. Gabriel stood there for a long moment, watching her breathe. He remembered the nights he used to sit in the dark, waiting for the silver to kill him. He remembered the silence of the empty house. Now he could hear Leo snoring in the next room. He could hear Jax and Sarah laughing in the kitchen downstairs as they cleaned up. He could hear his daughter's heartbeat. He wasn't the monster under the bed anymore. He was the shield that kept the monsters away. He felt Norah's hand on his back. "She's out," Norah whispered. "She looks like you," Gabriel said, keeping his voice low. "But she has my temper." "God help us when she turns 16, Norah laughed softly. She tugged his hand. "Come on, Alpha, you're off duty. Jax has the night watch." Gabriel let her lead him out of the room. They walked down the hall to the master suite. The door to the guest room where Norah had slept during the siege was gone. They had knocked down the wall years ago to create one massive sanctuary. Inside, a fire was crackling in the hearth. Gabriel took off his jacket and tossed it on a chair. He loosened his tie, letting out a long exhale as the tension of the gala finally left his shoulders. Chapter 45. The Last Command. Later, in the quiet of the night, Gabriel lay awake. Norah was asleep beside him, her head resting on his chest, her arm thrown over his waist. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the silver scars on his shoulder. He traced the lines of his own disfigurement. For years he had hated this skin. He had wanted to claw it off. Now it was just history. It was the map of how he got here. He felt the wolf inside him stir. The beast was content. It was curled up in his mind, sleeping soundly, no longer driven mad by poison or loneliness. Norah shifted in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. She nuzzled closer, her nose brushing his neck. Gabriel smiled in the dark. "I love you," he whispered to the silence. Norah's eyes fluttered open. She wasn't fully asleep. She looked up at him, her eyes dark and sleepy. "I heard that," she murmured. "Go back to sleep, Norah. Meek me." Gabriel rolled over, pinning her gently to the mattress. He hovered over her, his green eyes glowing faintly in the dark, not with rage, but with adoration. "You are insubordinate," he growled playfully, nuzzling her neck. "And you love it," she countered, running her hands down his back, tracing the muscles. "You'd be bored with a submissive mate." "True," he admitted. "I'd have gone mad years ago."
He kissed her jaw, his stubble grazing her skin. Gabriel? Do you remember the first night, when you told me to run? Gabriel paused. He pulled back to look at her. I remember. I thought I was saving you. You did save me, Norah said fiercely. You saved me from a life of fear. You gave me a home. You gave Leo a future. She reached up and cupped his scarred face, her thumb brushing his lower lip. You are the best man I know, Gabriel Thorne. Gabriel felt his throat tighten. Even after 5 years, her praise still had the power to bring him to his knees. I'm just a wolf, he whispered hoarsely. Norah smiled, that wicked, knowing smile that always drove him crazy. She leaned up, her lips brushing his ear. Then be a good boy and kiss me. Gabriel groaned, a low rumble of surrender that vibrated through the bed. As you command, my queen, he growled. And as he kissed her, under the roof of the home they had healed, Gabriel Thorne knew that the fracture was gone. There were no more echoes. There was only the sound of a life that was whole, wild, and infinitely, beautifully full. The end.
And that is how you tame a Lycan King. Not with silver, but with a whisper. Seeing Gabriel go from a feral beast to checking for monsters under his daughter's bed, that was the perfect happy ending. I really hope you enjoyed this journey as much as I loved bringing it to life for you. If this story made your day, please hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share our pack with more listeners. And if you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell turned on so you never miss a new romance. I have a question for you. If you were trapped in that library with a feral alpha, would you have been brave enough to call him a good boy? Let me know in the comments. And finally, if you want to support the channel directly and help me keep creating these long-form audiobooks, please feel free to leave a super thanks. It's that little heart icon below the video. Your support goes directly into better production, more art, and keeping this channel growing. It means the world to me. Thank you so much for watching. Welcome to the pack, and until the next full moon, stay romantic.